Received from Deputy Colin Burke. If attending from within the committee room or the precincts of Leinster House, you're asked to exercise personal responsibility to protect yourself and others against the risk of contracting COVID-19. It's still with us, unfortunately. Members of the committee attending remotely must continue to do so from within the precincts of the Parliament. This is due to the constitutional requirement that in order to participate in public meetings, members must be physically present within the confines of the place where the Parliament has chosen to sit. The Controller and Auditor General, Seamus McCarthy, is a permanent witness to the committee, and he's accompanied this morning by Mr. Mark Brady, Deputy Director of Audit at the Office of the Controller and Auditor General. This morning we have our first engagement of the new Dáil term with Horse Racing Ireland to examine its 2020 financial statements. So we're joined in the committee room by the following officials from HRI: Ms. Susan Mead, Chief Executive; Mr. Roger Casey, Chief Financial Officer; Mr. Jason Morris, Director of Racing and Strategic Projects; and Ms. Claire Rudd, Head of Risk and Compliance. We're also joined by the following officials from the Irish Horse Racing Regulatory Board: Mr. Darragh O'Loughlin, Chief Executive; and Mr. Donal O'Shea, Head of Finance. And finally, we're joined by the following officials from the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine: Mr. Martin Blake, Assistant Secretary, and Ms. Caroline Ball, Principal Officer. As usual, we remind all those in attendance to ensure that your mobile phones are in silent or switched off. Before we start, I wish to explain some limitations to parliamentary privilege and practice of the House as regards reference you may make to other persons in your evidence. As you're within the precincts of Leinster House, you're protected by absolute privilege in respect of the presentations you make to the committee. This means that you have an absolute defence against any defamation action for anything that you say at the meeting. However, you're expected not to abuse this privilege, and it's my duty as Cathaoirleach to ensure that this privilege isn't abused. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to an identifiable person or entity, you are directed to discontinue your remarks, and it is imperative that you comply with such directions. Members are reminded of the provisions of Standing Order 218 that the committee shall refrain from inquiring into the merits of a policy of the government or a minister of the government, or the merits of the objective of such policies. Members are also reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside of the House or an official either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. So to begin with, you're all very welcome. I want to call on the Controller and Auditor General, Mr. Seamus McCarthy, for his opening statement.
As the members are aware, Horse Racing Ireland was established to provide a statutory basis for the control, regulation and development of the horse racing industry in Ireland. In addition to its regulatory, funding and development activities, HRI operates a number of racecourses and runs a totaliser betting system. Organisationally, HRI's activities are delivered through a group structure involving the statutory body and 8 subsidiary companies. In addition, HRI has around a 1/3 shareholding in an associate company called Curragh Racecourse Limited. HRI received state funding of €67.2 million in 2020 from the Vote for Agriculture, Food and the Marine. This accounted for 71% of HRI's income in the year. HRI's other main sources of income were contributions from horse owners and sponsors towards racing prize money totalling €16.3 million, sales of media rights to the value of €5 million, registration fee income of €2.2 million, and thoroughbred industry contributions of €202,000. HRI incurred a net loss of €904,000 from racing activities in 2020 on turnover of just under €59 million. This outcome was a reversal from the small surplus of €294,000 in 2019 on turnover of just under €73 million. The decline in turnover and the loss incurred reflect the net impact of COVID-19 restrictions on racing and race attendance and of COVID financial supports provided. HRI had exceptional income of €9.3 million in 2020, mainly arising from the profit on a sale of land in Ballyogan, Dublin, to the Department of Education. The group accounts include a charge of €1 million in relation to a special dividend payment made by HRI to the Exchequer from the sales proceeds on the instructions of the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. On the expenditure side in 2020, HRI incurred costs totalling €86.7 million, including €51.6 million paid out in prize money. Expenditure of €11.9 million was incurred on integrity and racecourse services, mainly comprising grants to the Irish Horse Racing Regulatory Board. Overall, the HRI Group recorded a retained surplus of €13.8 million for 2020. The 2020 financial statements received a clear audit opinion. However, without qualifying that opinion, my report drew attention to two matters related to HRI's activities in the year. First, I drew attention to a loss of €1.8 million incurred in 2020 related to HRI's investment in Curragh Racecourse Limited. This followed a loss on the same investment of just over €2 million in 2019. HRI's cumulative loss to end 2020 arising from the investment was €6.4 million, representing almost 28% of the amount invested by HRI in the associate company. HRI recognised an impairment charge of €6.4 million on its investment in the HRI Statement of Financial Position for 2020. Curragh Racecourse Limited is a company established to provide for the redevelopment and management of the Curragh Racecourse. The redevelopment involved the construction of a new stand and other racing facilities, which opened in mid-2019. Ownership of the company is split between HRI, the private membership Turf Club, and a consortium of private investors. Notes 37 and 39 of the group financial statements explain that HRI had contributed funding to Curragh Racecourse Limited, totalling over €36 million up to the end of 2019. This comprised an investment of €23 million in return for a 35.29% economic interest in the company, grant funding of €12.5 million towards the cost of the construction project, the upfront payment of €500,000 for the right to use a hospitality suite at the racecourse for 30 years, and a loan of €500,000 given during 2019 to fund additional works on the racecourse's parade ring. Note 39 to the financial statements further discloses that Horse Racing Ireland entered into an agreement in 2020 to provide a convertible loan of up to €9 million to Curragh Racecourse Limited. By the 31st of December 2020, €6.9 million of the loan facility had been transferred to the company. Under the terms of the loan agreement, any outstanding liability to Horse Racing Ireland on the 31st of January 2024 will automatically convert to shares in the associate company. The second matter to which I drew attention is the disclosure in Note 15.1 to the financial statements that HRI booked a loss of €105,000 on the disposal of around 7 acres of land through a land swap deal undertaken by its subsidiary, the Tipperary Race Company plc. HRI acquired around 12 acres of land adjoining Tipperary Racecourse in 2019 at a cost of €25,000 an acre. Part of the land acquired was swapped with a neighbouring landholder, but was now valued at €10,000 an acre. The result was a write-down of around €15,000 an acre in the carrying value for the land disposed of. Certification of HRI's 2020 group financial statements was delayed as we awaited further information from HRI on the valuation of the investment in Curragh Racecourse Limited. HRI's group financial statements were certified by me on the 28th of April 2022, and we're currently engaged with HRI in the process of final clearance of the financial statements for 2021. Gormagat Macaulay.
Thanks, Seamus. Ms. Eid, you're welcome, and your staff are welcome to the meeting. As detailed in the letter of invitation, you have 5 minutes for your opening statement. So, Ms. Eid.
Thank you. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm grateful to be given the opportunity to appear before the Committee of Public Accounts to assist with the examination of the 2020 financial statements of HRI. My name is Suzanne Eid and I am the Chief Executive of HRI. Joining me today are HRI's Chief Financial Officer, Roger Casey, Director of Racing and Strategic Projects, Jason Morris, and Head of Risk and Compliance, Claire Rudd. As members will be aware, HRI is a commercial semi-state body responsible to the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, having been established under the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act 2001. HRI is responsible for the overall administration, governance, development and promotion of the Irish horse racing industry on an all-island basis. HRI operates a corporate structure which comprises the main body and 9 subsidiaries, one of which is dormant. HRI's functions are set out in legislation. The HRI board comprises a chair and 13 ordinary members who are a mixture of industry and ministerial nominees. HRI's Audit and Risk Committee is a statutory subcommittee of the board established to assist the board in fulfilling its oversight responsibilities. The Audit and Risk Committee has its own charter which outlines its purpose and key responsibilities. The committee meets at least 4 times annually to fulfil their duties to the board. I would like to apologise to the committee for the delay in the submission of the HRI 2020 financial statements, which was driven by some additional technical clarifications required by the CNAG in relation to the CURA. This required both external advice and a full sign-off of the Racecourse 2020 financial statements in advance of clearing the HRI accounts. HRI's group financial statements for 2021 will be submitted post-approval at HRI's October 10th board meeting, subject to CNAG clearance. We've provided you with briefing material in relation to the Curragh Racecourse Limited, but we will be happy to address questions you may have from any other matters related to the 2020 accounts or any other aspects of our finances. The horse racing and breeding industries are significant across all of Ireland, producing more than $2 billion in total expenditure annually and supporting approximately 29,000 direct and indirect jobs. Supportive government policy and legislation have put in structures in place which have not only protected this vital industry, but has allowed Ireland to compete at the highest level on the world stage, whilst enabling vital and sustainable rural-based employment throughout the country. HRI and the entire horse racing and breeding industries are very grateful to the Oireachtas for their continued support through the Horse and Greyhound Fund. It means that HRI can promote an industry in which new entrants can thrive, and since 2020 we've seen many new faces. It is heartening to see the 52 new trainers having their first winner since 2020, as well as hundreds of new racehorse owners every year. New owners and trainers typically mean more horses in training, and our industry figures would back that up. Given the labour-intensive nature of the racing industry and the care horses need, that also means many more racing jobs in rural Ireland. This ensures that breeders all over the country can have a vibrant market for their young horses, and only a competitive domestic racing environment underpinned by appropriate prize money can ensure that those who have invested at sales to prepare, train and improve young horses will see their investments and skills rewarded. Like many other industries, COVID brought serious challenges to our industry, with racing staged behind closed doors or with significantly reduced capacities during 2020 and 2021. However, racecourses weathered the storm, supported through government and HRI schemes and strong media rights income. Together with the Horse Racing Regulatory Board, HRI provided a solution for point-to-point racings in the spring of 2021, allowing it to continue on the racecourse for a period and ensuring that the trade which trickles down to the store sales and national hunt breeders continued to flow. The industry statistics published in August for the first half of 2022 points to a resilient industry. The number of horses in training is up over 15% on the last comparable year of 2019. This is a key figure when it comes to assessing total rural employment in the industry. In tandem with that, thousands of people are involved in horse ownership in Ireland, be it on their own or indeed many who enjoy a low-cost racing ownership experience through syndicates or racing clubs. Attendances in the first half of 2022 were down 9%, but we must view this dip in attendance through the prism of people being slow to attend crowded events post-COVID, as well as the current cost of living crisis, which has impacted every leisure and sporting arena in the world. That said, racing continues to deliver superb sporting occasions, showcasing the best of our industry and sport. Despite these headwinds, a strong racing product here in Ireland continues to be consumed in growing numbers on television and on mobile devices, and there remains a strong domestic and international confidence in the Irish thoroughbred, with bloodstock sales through public auction up 31% in 2019. I would like to welcome the appointment of Ms Anne Caulfield, the new CEO designate of the Gambling Regulatory Authority of Ireland. HRI, through its Industry Education and Training Department, Equip, has long supported the funding of addiction services, and the setting up of a gambling regulator in Ireland is very welcome, and I look forward to working with the authority once fully operational. Away from the racetrack, HRI has a number of strategic priorities, including equine welfare and sustainability. HRI has been instrumental in creating a business environment centred on the preeminent Irish-bred horse, and the headlines of successes worldwide are underpinned by vigilance around the care from which people who are in contact with the horses on a daily basis and prioritise their care and welfare. The daily care of the horses is the cornerstone of our horse welfare strategy, verifiable high standards of care for our population of horses. Included in these are improved traceability systems like the electronic passport issued to the 2021 foal crop and all subsequent crops. The welfare standard checklist published recently and safety nets supported by HRI, including the Troella platform for retired racecourses. We are very conscious of our responsibility under the Government's Climate Action Plan and are very well advanced on a sustainability strategy for the organisation and for the wider breeding and racing industry. Over the past couple of months, we have engaged with our stakeholders and held focus groups with industry organisations and can report a huge sustainability ambition within racing and breeding. Our role is to lead by example as an advocate and champion of sustainability, and to help the breeding and racing industry to increase its understanding of our responsibilities in this area through education, increased awareness and financial supports. Thank you for the invitation here today to discuss the 2020 accounts. We look forward to taking your questions on any other matters concerning the racing and breeding industry in Ireland.
Thank you, Ms Eade. The first committee speaker today is Deputy Matt Carty. Each member will have 10 minutes, and we'll have a second round of questions or third round then following that. So proceed.
Good Cahirlock, and thank you to all our guests for being here. Just want to get a little bit of further clarification in relation to the delay in the financial statements. So essentially the rationale given is the issues pertaining to the Curragh racecourse led to a delay in HRI submitting your accounts. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So at what point did you actually submit your accounts to the department?
We submitted them 23rd of March 2021.
Okay, and when?
Those were draft accounts.
Draft unaudited accounts, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
So draft unaudited accounts were delivered on the 23rd of March?
Yeah.
Okay, so when were the audited accounts then submitted?
The audited accounts would have been sent on the 13th of May 2022.
Okay. So there's quite a substantial delay on that. The unaudited accounts were furnished to the department, is that correct?
To the department and to the CNAG before they start their audit in April.
Okay. Can I ask the department when or if those unaudited accounts were laid before their office?
If I may, our responsibility is to lay the audited accounts before their office, which you did in September.
Okay. So can I ask then what the department did between receiving the unaudited accounts in March 2021 and receiving the audited accounts in May 2022? Did the department make any measures or have any direct consultations with HRI in respect of that?
I mean, the department has ongoing conversation with the HRI, but in the context of the accounts specifically, we await the outcome of the CNAG report before actually taking final positions on them. So, I mean, we were aware of the issue. We had the accounts, but we weren't actioning anything specifically on the accounts until we get the CNAG report.
Okay. So could I ask the CNAG then, in terms of the rationale that has been provided, whether your office has any concerns regarding what were failures to adhere to the relevant circulars, and whether you're satisfied that there won't be repeat issues in the future?
Well, certainly we obviously try to complete an audit and get the certificate to everybody as soon as possible. I think there is an obligation once the accounts have been signed off on. There's an obligation to get them within 3 months is the standard to the Oireachtas Library, and so that they're available for the committee. There was a bit of a delay, I think, over the summer in the submission of the audited accounts. I think the point of draft unaudited accounts going to the department is that the department is aware of the broad financial position of a state body at the earliest possible time. It's obviously subject to confirmation then by the audit process. I think the delay that we had was in relation to the accounting for the investment in CRL. The loss, I think, was recognised in the draft financial statements. So that information would have been available to the department from the draft, but we weren't happy that they were properly accounted for, and that was the technical advice had to be received by HRI to complete that process.
Okay, so just before I move on to the Curra, can you explain briefly, and this is to move on to a different subject, your role in auditing the Ihrb? Is that the same as with the HRI?
It would be similar. They're obviously a separate body, and there's a separate set of financial statements for them.
Okay, so just want to move on to the Curra racecourse. Ms. Eade, you might just explain very simply what's the current breakdown of shareholding with for Curra racecourse?
Okay, so there's a ownership and an economic ownership. So HRI has 33% of the voting shares. The Turf Club has 33% of the voting shares, and then the private investors, including founder investments, have the remainder of the shares, and they're a group of different individuals across the bloodstock arena who invested into the...
So that would be 34%?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Curra racecourse, the Turf Club, explain to me the difference between the Turf Club and Ihrb, because is there anybody that can provide that?
Well, the Turf Club was the original body.
Yes.
And then they migrated after the 2016 Horse Racing Act to separate, and we set up the Ihrb, which is the pure regulatory body. There may be somebody more technical able to explain the origins of the two, but that's effectively it. The Ihrb run the regulatory services for horse racing.
So is the Turf Club part of the Ihrb, or a component part of it, or is it a completely separate entity?
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, Mr. O'Gaughey.
Thanks very much, Deputy Carty. The origins of the Turf Club go all the way back to the mists of time, 1790, as a private members club, but the Ihrb, of which I'm the chief executive, is a limited company, limited by guarantee. It was established by the Turf Club and by the Irish National Hunt and Steeplechase Committee in 2018 in order to stand independent of the clubs to perform the regulatory functions in Irish horse racing. So my employer is the Ihrb as an entity. My employer is not the Turf Club.
Okay. So the Turf Club owns 33% of the Curra racecourse. How much money did they have to put in towards that to get that 33% shareholding?
As part of the setup of the company, the Turf Club gave the racecourse. That was their contribution, and all the history that goes along with that. So financially, they didn't contribute to the project.
So they provided the land and essentially
the racecourse, the lease, and all that. Yeah.
Okay.
But the state owns the land.
Yeah, just on a point of information, my understanding is that their economic share is 24%
That's right,
of
yeah.
CRL. Their voting rights they have a 33% voting right, but they have an economic interest in it to the tune of 24%.
If you like, Deputy Carty, their economic share in the racecourse was diluted as other investors put more money in.
They held on to their voting share.
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
That's
and-
part of the original shareholder agreements,
So you
yeah.
touched on this, so they provided the land, the race course.
They've provided the race course.
Okay, so who
And
owns
the
who owns
history and everything that goes with it, yeah.
So who owns the race course, the land?
The land is owned by the Department of Defence.
Okay, so the Department of Defence owned the land. The Turf Club,
The Turf Club.
they have a lease, and then that allowed them to get a 33% vote in the. That's a fairly good deal for them, I would have thought.
It needed the Turf Club its contribution for the actual whole development to take off, yeah.
Okay, so how, again, just in terms of the breakdown, it appears to me that somehow there was a very strong effort made to ensure that the ownership structure and voting structure meant that essentially the Curragh race course isn't accountable to the CNAG, for example. Can I ask the Department of Agriculture, because you were part of all of this and in effect have funded a lot of this through various means, why that was the case?
Thank you, Deputy. I might recall the actual 2016 Act actually set out the precedent for this, and this set up the actual
The 2016 Act?
2016, yeah.
Yeah.
This allowed this recognised the development of the Ihrb as the regulatory body, and as part of that, they're and they're funded through the HRI. So
Yeah.
this is the regulatory forum in which this happens. As part of this, they voluntarily have agreed to comply with the Code of Governance for state bodies, even though they're not a state body. So their rules and regulations and governance systems comply with that. So they have a service level agreement with the HRI in relation to providing the regulatory services.
No, I'm talking specifically about Curragh Racecourse, because the department approved substantial capital expenditure on Curragh Racecourse. I'm wondering if there was a reason why the department, when you were engaging with all the parties, didn't put in place a system whereby the racecourse would be an auditable body by the CNAG.
I think, it was, as I understand, set up as an investment by HRI in a company to run the racecourse. So, it's an investment by HRI.
Which is predominantly funded by your department.
And permission for that was actually sought and consented to by the Department of Agriculture and Department of Public
Yes, so my question is there a reason why, consider there was also capital grants provided by the department, isn't that true?
That's true. Yeah.
So considering all of that and considering that a substantive part of the actual money that was invested into the project, and that the land is built on public land, or that the racecourse is built on public land, why is it then that there is no public accountability mechanism for the racecourse?
Well, I think the issue is it's a private company. It was an investment by a state body in a private company. And that was the way it was set up.
Okay.
It was a third investment in the context of the cost of at the outset.
But do you accept that we're in a convoluted situation here now, because HRI are providing convertible loans that may be in turn converted into shares, and by the accounts that we have seen are likely to be. There's an exemption in relation to freedom of information requests as well, because of the structure that has been put in place. I'm just wondering if, since that time, the department, either Agriculture or Deeper, have carried out an analysis as to whether or not mistakes have been made in terms of how the Curragh racecourse was approached.
I think we have definitely engaged in the process and evaluated across ourselves and with the Department of Expenditure and Reform. And we've also got some guidance from New Era in the context of actually the investment and how we actually work through this. The issue is ongoing. Our understanding is that, at the end of 2024, the shareholding could increase.
Ongoing, but effectively the state's in a weak position. From what the Deputy's questions. Deputy Verona Murphy.
I'll just pick up there, Chair. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Congratulations, Miss Eade. I don't believe you were here since your appointment. I can't recall. No, Mr. Kavanagh would have been with us. So just to go back to that, Mr. Blake, I think what Deputy Carty, if I'm correct, is that it's a vast amount of public money that you've signed off on in the department as an investment that's gone wrong? And where's the accountability? Who's taking responsibility like? Who decides that this was a good investment? And when it's gone wrong, who takes responsibility is the question.
I think in fairness, Deputy, the investment was made in good faith. It was made on a business case that was developed. I think no one can deny that the actual economic environment in the meantime has not been favourable to many businesses. So I'm not necessarily saying that this, I mean, I think what we have is a significant asset.
Well, on that then, have we had a review of how we would be making investments in a structure, as Deputy Carty has pointed out, where there is no actual accountability?
I can't say we have had a specific review of that.
Would it be a good idea?
Well, I mean, what I would say is, like, this is constantly on conversation between ourselves and HRI.
Well, would it be a good idea for the former CEO of HRI to become the new chair of Curra Racecourse? Like, is that not something that concerns you?
I think that's something that we had no hand or part in.
Oh, I understand that and I accept that, but would it be cause for concern for the future of investments like this? Does it not present some form of conflict?
To be honest, Deputy, I have no concern about the individual who was appointed.
That's grand. Do you have a concern about the money that's left to be drawn down? Is it somewhere in the region of, is it 9 million?
I mean, there's always a concern.
Do you have oversight of that?
Yes, there is a concern about actual deployment of public funds.
There is. Who has it? Is it just us? Is it here in the Accounts Committee, or whose concern is it? Seems like a fierce, sloppy transaction of public money to me.
I mean, this is an investment that the Department and deeper sanctioned for HRI to actually undertake.
Yeah.
It's a state body set up to actually control
With no
regulate.
oversight following your sanction. There doesn't appear to be any oversight following your sanction. Would that be a fair statement?
That's not fair.
It's not.
No. I mean, we continuously engage with HRI in the context of their investment.
And did you engage with Miss Eade to tell her the accounts were late?
Pardon?
Did you engage with Miss Eade to tell her that the accounts were late and where the issue was? Did somebody say, why are, like, Miss Eade, moving to you, you're the former financial officer of HRI. The accounts were late.
Yeah, so we would have written to the department with every delay that was caused, and we kept them updated. So,
hold on a second now. Before you wrote to the department with the delay, were you not concerned, having previously held the role of the financial officer of HRI, were they late when you were financial officer? Were
yes,
they ever late?
they were late on this. This was late under my watch. Yeah, but all of the.
Sorry, yes, you were the financial officer.
I was a financial officer,
yes.
but all of the subsidiaries were all on time. They were all signed. It was this technical transaction that required the support of technical advisors outside of HRI. So we had to get the whole building evaluated, and then we had to get advice on the technical.
Why couldn't you get them on time?
Sorry?
Why couldn't you get them on time?
Because we were asked to get that information in October of 2021. We weren't asked before to get the technical advice.
And so you wouldn't have known?
We didn't know this was required. That's the only reason.
Right.
I mean, it's not something we've ever had happen to us before. But the responsibility in terms of getting the accounting right was paramount, and it was important to the CNAG, and we had to comply with their requirements.
And whose responsibility was it?
What I'm saying is we didn't know until late in the day that was a requirement to get third-party advice.
But you knew there was a problem?
Not at that time. I didn't know. I thought we'd accounted for it correctly.
Money, it was still a problem, the loss?
The loss after depreciation has been well flagged, and in fairness, the former CEO would have highlighted that in the last visit to the PAC, that we were suffering losses.
I'm not sure that we knew the amount at the last PAC, you know, and I'd be quite concerned that the new, where Mr. Kavanagh has moved on to, I would be concerned about that structure going forward. I mean, someone who serves on a board that deals with public funding and is now in situ in a semi-private, or is it fully private?
Fully private, yeah.
It's fully private, right. Who knows all the goings on of HRI is now in charge of a structure of where HRI are part owner. I wouldn't be at all happy with that. And I think as public servants, including myself, that's something that should be prevented going forward for positions. To avoid to make it transparent, to ensure there's transparency and full accountability.
Can I just come back to you, Deputy, just on something you might have said to Martin, who would not have been, sorry, Mr. Blake, who would not have been involved with some of the, we have done a post-appraisal, 2 of them, in fact, since whilst the project was going on, and we submitted that to the department, and we have to provide regular updates to the Minister on the performance of the Curragh. So just
And
he may
you-
not have been aware of
Can you
that.
forward those appraisals to the Public Accounts Committee?
We can do, yeah.
That's grand. The other thing I want to ask you is, how do you feel you're performing on behalf of your patrons? Do you get many complaints? Has there been any issues?
Well, we always get queries. We always get, whether they're PQs, we get
No complaints?
issues. Oh, yeah, we do get complaints. Yeah.
Did
Yeah, of course we do.
did you inform that there was going to be an increase in prize money and then withdrew that this year?
No, we never
You
said there would be
didn't-
an increase in prize money. No.
Has
no.
has the structure in relation to, like, what if somebody wins something? How long does it take to pay out the money?
It's 14 days. Is it?
It's after 15.
It's not
After
7
15
months.
days, post the
It
testing.
wouldn't be 7 months.
It wouldn't be 7 months. No.
Ever. There wouldn't be any
There would have to
issues.
have been something wrong, an adverse finding, or something
Well,
else
I've
that would
received
delay.
a number of complaints from your
Okay.
patrons, a number. And
Okay.
they vary from everything from, it would appear to me there has been a serious diminution of what is actually handed out by HRI.
Okay.
Pardon? In different structure, in different competitions, let's say. Your prize money may not have changed, but how you're passing it out and all of that. Now, I'll pass them on to you.
Please
and
do, yeah.
I will be looking into it further, because there does seem to be a very varied approach. And, like, we can't forget that HRI is a structure to help the sector and to regulate it. But, like, it can't be all one-sided at the same time. Now, I just want to go back to, I'll ask about the prize money, actually. Or no, the disposal of lands.
Yeah.
Could you explain that, please? How in the name, another, what looks like on paper as just poor judgment. Could you explain that to the committee?
Okay, so to be perfectly honest, it looks worse than it actually is in reality. So let maybe talk you through the process. We purchased a big portion of land, which is to do with the development in relation to Tipperary. At the very onset, we knew that part of the process was going to require us to do a swap of of some of that land to get the land that would allow us to widen the track. So for us, this is of real strategic value, and also the actual. When we went to do the swap, it wasn't really of high interest to the seller to do anything in particular in relation to the swap. So we wanted that land. We wanted that land for our overall development. So it's of strategic high value to us to get that land. What happened was there was a book loss of 105k in relation to that project, in relation to land itself. But there was no cash loss to HRI. That land is more important to us than it was. Where we got the oversight wrong, probably in relation to that, Deputy, is that we looked at the project as a swap, and we didn't look at it as a disposal and an acquisition. That's where we got it wrong. But for us, that land is worth more than what we gave away to
Who
us.
valued it?
Pardon?
Who valued the land?
We had the value of the original land valued, it was a couple of years back?
Yeah.
By who?
When we did the original purchase.
By one value. You got one valuation, was it?
Yeah.
You just got one valuation.
Yes, we did.
Did
yeah.
you sign off on that, Mr. Blake?
We would have, the board would have signed off on what they were willing to pay for the land, yeah.
But Mr. Blake is the department.
They would have
Mr.
signed
Blake
off.
need to sign off on
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And one valuation.
Yeah.
I would have thought when you're spending public money, you would have at least got two to ascertain, so we wouldn't have this issue. Is that how we've ended up with this issue? Was the
No,
valuation incorrect?
Yeah, it was Tipperary's funding. They paid for it out of their own funding, yeah.
No, I said, was the valuation incorrect? Well, like, I mean.
I can't judge it. A valuer will give you, like, they're qualified to value the land. We accepted their valuation.
You did, unfortunately. I'll come back in, Chair.
Deputy Allen Dillon.
Thanks very much, Cathaoirleach, and I'd like to welcome our guests who are joining us today. I'll start in relation to HRI's contribution to prize money, and maybe, Ms. Eade, you might give us an explanation if the €35 million allocated to HRI has contributed to the prize money in 2021. Is this Exchequer funds?
I didn't hear the last part.
Is this Exchequer funds that's related to the 35 million under HRI?
Yeah, we would use Exchequer funding. So when we get our budget allocation from the department annually, it's broken down to revenue and capital expenditure. And of that revenue allocation, we're given the amount that we're allowed to spend up to on prize money. And generally, that's about up to 80% of our revenue allocation from the department.
And do you prepare an analysis of the distribution of that prize money in relation to, in terms of where it contributes to the industry?
Yeah, it's part of our directives. You can see the actual distribution across all of the bodies, whether it's trainers, owners, and together with the fact book, then you can work out which goes to every element of the industry.
And just in relation to the last analysis that you prepared, can you give us an overview in terms of what were the results from the distribution of Exchequer funds that was used as prize money?
I'm not sure if I'm going to answer your question properly, so excuse me if I get it wrong. So if you look at what generally happens is about 70% of the overall prize money would end up with the owner, okay?
So in terms of your analysis, so if I ask it a different way, in terms of the percentage of prize money that goes to the top 5 trainers in the country, do you prepare that type of analysis?
That would all be in our fact book that we publish. Sorry, do you need that information now? Sorry.
Well, if you can give us an understanding in terms of the distribution,
Fact book, yeah.
and how is the 50 million paid in prize money for 2022 distributed? Again, it's probably given us a bit of transparency in terms of the use of Exchequer funds to fund prize money, and if so, you know, it's difficult to kind of process why we're using Exchequer funds, taxpayers' money, to fund, you know, the top 5 trainers within the industry. And I think we need some visibility on this and a reasoning as to why and how this has been distributed and how it's been improved over time.
I think, Deputy, just in general terms, there were, I think, 4,900 owners, of whom 3,600 won prize money. So whilst obviously the top horses and top trainers and top owners and jockeys will earn more, it is spread amongst a large portion of those participating in the sport, and we do have very high minimum values for our races in Ireland compared to Britain. So we would have €10,000 as our minimum value, for instance. So we are very conscious. Our sort of strapline is winning the world over and growing the grassroots, and that's really the dual objective of our prize money strategy, to make sure that we continue to succeed internationally, but at the same time that we're growing the grassroots and helping those at the lower ends who do face challenges against some very dominant stables.
So in 2020, what level of prize money was distributed across all trainers? Do you have that types of
We can
analysis?
certainly get that information for you.
Yeah.
It is published in the fact book, but we can give you any breakdown you require.
Okay. No, thanks very much. Just in relation to the next area I want to look on is equine welfare. Is the HRI responsible, you know, for the publication of standards on equine welfare in Ireland?
Yeah, this is the book that was launched at Listowel this week. So basically it outlines our principles of animal welfare. Some of it is for those that work in the industry, this stuff they already know. But for us, it was important that we got something out there and said, these are the standards that we're working to, and this is what's important to us. So it was launched on TG Cahir during the week by Mr. Osborne during the week.
And in terms of your main concerns, what are your main concerns in relation to equine welfare?
Well,
and what steps are you
you know,
taking
the
address
issue for
these?
us is always people knowing what to do at the end of life of a race horse. That's probably the area where we've stepped in mostly in terms of that, and education. They're the key things: education, and then giving people the useful links that they'll need to be able to find somewhere for the horse after the horse has finished racing. And we're doing that quite successfully. But they're probably the key areas, I would say.
And in terms of IHRB, you know, what analysis and research have IHRB undertaken in relation to the standards of equine welfare in Ireland?
Deputy, equine welfare is at the core of everything that IHRB does in relation to integrity. So we have a team of vets on staff. No racing event, no point-to-point, no flat jump, no flat race, and no jump race occurs without IHRB vets being on site. Our vets are there to check the welfare of the horses before the race starts. They watch the race and they check the horses again after the race. Horses are trotted up and down to ensure they're not running lame. Even our dope testing regime, or equine anti-doping, I should say, regime, is designed with the welfare of the horse in mind. So we're looking for substances that are prohibited at all times, but we're also looking for inappropriate use of other medication. And because no horse, we believe, should be medicated other than entirely appropriately, other than by a veterinary surgeon who's involved in the care and treatment of that horse. Then when we receive concerns, as we sometimes do, about the condition of a particular horse or of a group of horses in a location, on a premises, in a field, it could be anywhere, if that information comes into us, as it frequently does, our veterinary officers treat that as the highest priority on the day. They drop what they're doing and they go out and they check on those horses. If the concerns prove to be justified, and sometimes unfortunately they are justified, we make immediate contact with the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. So we have authorised officers authorised under the Animal Remedies Acts, but also authorised under animal welfare legislation. The Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine then comes in and assists and participates closely if there are prosecutions to be brought in respect of the treatment of animals. DAFM takes care of that. If there are rule breaches as regards the treatment of animals or the medication of animals, breaches under the rules of racing, we send those to referrals committees and we impose sanctions.
And in the last 2 years, how many fines or suspension have IHRB issued in relation to breaches of welfare or anti-doping regulation?
At this point, every adverse analytical finding, or everywhere where we have detected inappropriate use of a medicine, whether that's a prohibited at all times substance or a medicine that shouldn't have been in the horse on race day, all of those adverse analytical findings from 2021 and 2022, all bar 2 of those, have already come to hearing with sanctions handed down. We publish those sanctions on our website. Press statements go out. They tend to be carried in the national press as well. We still have a very small number of cases to hear, but we anticipate having those heard by the end of this calendar year.
And have you made any recommendations to HRI in relation to findings in recent times, and have these recommendations been implemented?
Our veterinary officer, or chief veterinary officer, works very closely with the veterinary officer in the Equine Welfare Unit in HRI, so there's very close collaboration there in relation to standards of equine welfare and in relation to HRI understanding what the outcomes of our processes are, but while cases are still in process, so in that space between an adverse analytical finding and a committee handing down a finding, or finding a breach and handing down a sanction, that's essentially closed, because we have to treat people as innocent until we have found them to have breached rules. But then HRI is aware of all of that activity after the fact, and as regards what proper equine welfare standards would be, what racecourses need to look like, what stables need to look like, what the training for trainers needs to look like, what the training for stable staff needs to look like. HRI and IHRB would work very closely on all of that.
And in relation to the department, is the department satisfied in terms of the analysis that's currently underway, and you know, are they satisfied with the level of transparency on equine welfare? And
I think that what I could say is over the last number of years, the relationship between the department and IHRB has been significantly enhanced and improved. There's very close collaboration, sharing of information, and working together on cases where there may be breaches of our regulations and breaches of the rules of racing. So there's very close working relationship. So we're very pleased with it.
Deputy Catherine Murphy.
Just in relation to breakdown of attendances, and obviously we know COVID impacted, you know, very significantly, but is that something that you monitor, and do you monitor all the categories in relation to attendances?
Deputy Murphy, we wouldn't monitor individual categories of attendances. We get updates from the racecourses in terms of their attendances overall. We wouldn't get into the individual breakdowns. Obviously, within the racecourses that we directly are part of our subsidiary group, we would get into more financial analysis of as what's driving the attendances, what's working, what's not.
Would that be the case in the Curragh?
I would see the Curragh attendance revenue numbers, but I wouldn't have gone into the categories of paying attendees. No, I wouldn't have done that before.
So there's no issue with, you know, publishing the figures, the attendance figures?
In terms of the private race courses, we'd probably we'd have to understand. You mean to get that granularity that you're talking about?
Yeah.
I think we would have to ask them, and whether it's a commercially sensitive issue for them, because they're all competing with one another and they're competing against other arenas as well. I'm not sure how they would feel about giving us that breakdown.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a big industry, and essentially it does show the health of an industry if people are attending. I know that people will view on television and so on, but attendances will tell us something, and we can monitor performance out of that. Just in relation to the CEO of the ex-CEO, Brian Kavanagh, he's now the CEO of the Curragh Racing. You may well have responded to some of this already. Could you set out a timeline for Mr. Kavanagh's departure? Do you have that available?
So Mr. Kavanagh left HRI on the 25th of September 2021, and he commenced his role in the Curragh in November 2021.
Right, okay. You know, when was the minister or the official in the department, or would they have been made aware that that he was taking up a post with the Curragh?
I suppose if I look at the process, the appointment of the CEO for CRL was a matter for the CRL board.
Yeah, but horse racing.
Yeah, it was their board that and their chairman that would have recommended, having gone through a process, they would have they were the ones to recommend Mr. Kavanagh, and then that recommendation then came to the HRI board in June 2021, and it was approved. But HRI or the department would not have been involved in that recruitment process or that appointment.
No, understand that. When were you made aware? Like, you would have got notice in advance on that he was taking up the post.
When he was appointed, when he was formally appointed in June 21.
So you didn't know until then?
No.
Okay, right. And was that discussed with the Risk and Audit Committee, or would it have been just the board?
It would not have been discussed by HRI's Audit and Risk Committee because, as I said, it was a board appointment by CRL.
Yeah, okay. I'm just interested just to follow on, and again, you may well have covered some of this. how the investment of the 9 million arose. Like, who came to who in relation to that?
Who, sorry, who?
Who made the approach in relation to the 9 million investment?
Well, to be perfectly honest, when I look back on the process, what we were doing was carrying out a post-appraisal of the project and how the development, so HRI had a evaluation team looking at the project and the development costs, and HRI also put in a subcommittee of the board to evaluate the performance of the development. So one of the things we could see that the project was costing more, and also having worked through the development, that there were losses accruing. So it would have been through the subcommittee and the chair of HRI that we went out and said we felt that there was more funding required. So we would have instigated it to get funding from all the other parties. Okay. So we sort of drove the funding.
Okay, and who was on the subcommittee?
It would have been members of the board, to be honest. So it would have been our chairman, a member of an independent member of the board, Peter Nolan, and the other one would have been another member, which I think was
Okay, so there were.
There was three members. They were the ones, okay. And the finance team had to do all the analysis.
And they
came
back then. They came back and said that the project is at risk if there isn't an investment. Would that be how it transpired?
If I look back on the project, okay, or I look at where it is now, the Curragh had to be updated.
Yeah.
It definitely did. It had no development since 1962, and it had become uninsurable. But I think when people look at it now, they need to look at it beyond just the racecourse. This is a magnificent training facility as well for lots of trainers around Ireland and around the Curragh in particular. Hundreds of horses are using this track every day, and there's 80 miles of turf, peat and all-weather gallops across 1,500 acres. It really is a strategic asset for Ireland. Right. I know it's not financially performing the way we all want it to be, but it is important. It's the first time we've had a facility for flat racing that we could welcome international visitors comfortably with, and now consumers have somewhere they can go and enjoy. It's had a really tough start. You know, I think operating during development was a challenge and was tough. I think then the opening in 19 probably didn't showcase it at its best. 2 years of COVID, and now they're starting back. It has been tough. And I'm very much interested in the commercial performance of the Curragh. I want it to improve. I wanted to see an increase in attendances. They've tried things this year, some of which have worked, some of which have not worked. But I will be all about bringing back the spirit to the Curragh, because without that spirit, it isn't what we want it to be.
Yeah, I represent North Kildare, not South Kildare, where the Curragh is, but I'd be very familiar with. I'd be familiar with, obviously, the location and some of the things that are adjacent to it. So, and the importance of the equine sector to the county as well. So, just you know, it's important that it does succeed and thrive. I just wanted to get some sort of a sense of what this interaction was and why it was necessary. Has all that money been drawn down at this stage? Has the loan been?
No, I definitely don't think that. I think we have to look at the amount of private investment that went into this as well. There was 47 million from other investors, plus another huge investment by another individual into the gallops themselves. I think that we've definitely learned lessons for projects going forward, and we've applied that to both our capital guidelines, and we've applied them to particularly to the work that we're doing on Tipperary. And I think that they have done, there has been a lot of good work as well done in the Curragh that's probably not very evident to people just yet, and I hope they will start to see that by next year.
Okay, just to move on, the former CEO, Dennis Egan, stood down in mid-2021. Can you detail the circumstances in relation to whether or not there was an exit package provided, and if so, what that was?
So, myself and the CEO of the Ihrb are working through a process currently. They're going through a huge transformation process, and a payment has been made by the Ihrb, and we are in discussion about that currently with the Ihrb.
So there is no amount that you... It's not concluded, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not concluded.
When it's concluded, can you...
I expect over the next couple of weeks, there's work that myself and Mr. O'Loughlin are working on to get that matter resolved. But we are very supportive of the transformation project that the Ihrb has gone through. And together as two organisations, we're going to be working very closely on delivering efficiencies for both organisations.
Okay, and can you let us know when that
Yes.
when that happens? And
Thank
just
you.
can I just
I'll
finally
back in
ask,
for a second
was an
round.
NDA entered
Very
into?
briefly.
Yeah.
Are you okay, Deputy?
Just
I'll
was
back
it-
in for a second round.
The very last question
go on,
was
just
was
briefly,
an NDA entered into with...
I think the Ihrb might need to come back on that one to you. I'm not aware of that.
Right, okay.
Okay, Deputy McAuliffe.
Margaret Cahill, and my apologies, I was attending a meeting next door, so more eager colleagues than I have asked questions already. I apologise. I just want to turn to the liquidation of Seneca. In the 2019 accounts, I suppose there was a report of, I think it was 389,000 loss of cash, of 389,000. But not a corresponding loss to the horsing and of state funding, for the horse and greyhound funding. So you might just update the committee on just where things have gone with that liquidation process since the 2019 accounts.
Yeah, so we finalised the settlement with the liquidator, and I think we got maybe 120,000 back after fees. And we obviously are with a very different provider right now. We've got better systems with that provider. They're a bigger entity, safer for us, if you like. And like I said, we do daily monitoring, and the CFO receives monthly performance on every aspect of how they're delivering for us. So that's where that's ended up.
Can I just come back up to the 120,000? So of the 389, of the loss of 389, there was a recovery of 120,000.
That's right, yeah.
And you said with fees, what were the fees connected with the?
I'd have to come back to you on the
recovery?
fees.
Were they a significant multiple, or were they?
No, because to be perfectly honest, what we knew we weren't going to get very far by putting more money on the legal side. So we actually down-dialed it because we weren't going to get anything more for it.
Yeah. In terms of, I suppose, the origin of that problem was the financial stability of the provider. I suppose, what measures have you put in place in terms of sourcing a new provider to ensure that there is financial stability there of the provider? A very difficult thing to completely eliminate the risk, but have you made any measures to?
So we went through obviously a public procurement process again for the new provider, and we would have measured all sorts of financial stability, including we get financial information on how this company is performing. But I suppose it's a much bigger player and a much, they're much easier to.
Were the criteria for that procurement process different than the one used for the procurement itself?
There may have been, if I remember correctly, the measures of what was more important. When you measure a procurement,
the weighting.
The weighting, slightly changed.
Okay.
We're always under pressure on cost, but we looked across other, maybe tweaked the range. I'd need to come back to you on the
you might come back to the committee on that, because I suppose obviously it's a learning, and if steps weren't put in place, that would be disappointing. So have you exhausted the recovery process now?
Yeah.
That's
Yes, we have, yeah.
Okay, you might just restate for the committee. I suppose people here have a loss of 389,000. Just can you restate how there was no loss to the state?
It was part of our
Sorry, no loss to the horse and greyhound racing.
because it was our subsidiaries that had the losses. So the tote and the race courses who would have lost it out of their own profits, their own income.
And there was no resulting drawing of resources by those subsidiaries. So you can imagine how there wasn't an initial impact, but that over time there might be an impact. For example, they may have required additional resources as a result.
Not because of Seneca.
Okay.
Not because of Seneca.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I might just turn to the Tipperary site. I don't know if anybody else has covered it yet. Just that there was a loss there of 105,000. You might bring us through that.
You happy for me to answer this again? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Well, apologies now.
No, that's fine. So effectively, what happened here was we're redeveloping, or hoping to redevelop Tipperary into an all-weather track, and there was parcels of lands that we wanted to procure, but also at the same time we knew we would have to procure some and then swap some to get the width of the racetrack as we desired. Okay, so we acquired the first piece of land, and then we got into a negotiation with another seller to swap that land. And when we did that, we swapped at a deemed lower value than we had paid for the land. The land we had purchased had been made up of...
You used the word deemed there deliberately. Why?
Well, there wasn't a cash loss.
Yeah.
So it was a book loss, and so we had to write down the value of the investment in the short term. The land that we had bought, the larger acreage, had a mixture of land, and we actually managed to get some of the land moved on that we didn't want effectively to run the project. And what happened?
When was the original site purchased?
Was it 2018?
Yeah.
2018.
And do you know the price per acre for that site?
It was 25k an acre.
Okay. And I suppose the long-term objective of having that width or the footprint, I suppose, do you envisage when we might see a realisation of that benefit, or?
It definitely depends on the funding, but the funding and planning permission. So we have received planning permission already, but there is an appeal with Board Planola. But we're hoping that if we had the funding in place to finish the project, we would be racing on an all-weather track come Q1 of 2025.
Okay. And can I ask, was there a requirement to seek approval from the department for the disposal of that?
Because it was a swap, it's not clear in the Code of Governance, but since we reviewed the transaction, the department have come back and said on a go-forward basis, if such a transaction happens, we do need to look for ministerial approval. But it wasn't clear in the code, and it was below a threshold of reporting. The threshold's 150,000.
And I think that's very good synopsis from your perspective. Would the department agree that was the synopsis? You know, was it clear?
I mean, I suppose the first thing, we came across this, I suppose, most visibly in the context of the CNAJ report. That was the first time it sort of came visible to us that there was that this swap had actually taken with a loss of money. I mean, our view was that this, disposal and acquisition should have been notified to the department. And having talked through it with HRI, they now acknowledge that should have happened. So we've recently engaged with them on that basis and written to them on that basis. And I think moving forward, we would expect any such thing. I think as Ms. Eda said, just swaps is not specifically covered, but it is an acquisition and a disposal. So,
yes. Yeah. I suppose it's a responsibility on the department, I suppose, to ensure that, I suppose the Controller Auditor General's report is one place that you can find out the details of those sales, but I suppose there might have been a more hands-on approach by the department in ensuring that those responsibilities were more understood.
I think we have
or do you
ongoing
believe the
engagement.
department had done enough to make?
Yeah. I suppose we have ongoing engagement, but I think we have to realise as well, like, it is a commercial state body which has its own board and its own expertise in these matters. The the actual code of practice for governance is there, it's visible to all. It's just as Ms. Eads has said, it just didn't mention swaps, but it does talk about acquisitions and disposals. And should have been.
Are you suggesting that the capacity was there then they should have known?
It's our view that it should have been notified to us.
Okay. And that it should have been notified. Okay. I appreciate that answer. Thank you very much, Claire.
The next deputy is Deputy Imelda Munster.
Okay, thanks, Chair. First question would be to Mr. O'Loughlin. Just in relation to CCTV footage, the HRI had announced on their website, going back in 2017, that it was to be installed. And then the Irish Horse Racing Board diverted that funding in 2018. Yeah. And last November, you told the committee that it would be, you're looking towards the end of the year. And then in April, then you'd said mid-autumn. And we received the response today that's, I suppose, it's detailed, but it's extremely vague. Firstly, can you explain to me what first fixing is?
It's the electrical work, the wiring work and the electrical work that's required. It's everything up as far as actually attaching cameras to it.
Okay.
So the project, and I absolutely acknowledge that the timelines on the project has followed have not been the timelines that the committee received a year ago. And that's something that's deeply frustrating to all of us in the Ihrb as well. But the procurement process commenced last winter. That took a couple of months, as these processes do, and then there was a legal challenge or legal correspondence from one of the unsuccessful bidders. That delayed things still further. But once the project actually got underway, we started making very good progress. There were some unanticipated delays in a lot of racecourses. So where we are now, we have cameras actually being put up in the stables in 2 racecourses. We have another 4 racecourses with all that electrical work, first fix work is complete, ready to hang cameras. We've got the first fix electrical work in progress in another 4 racecourses. What we hadn't anticipated at the start of the project was that there would be courses that required civil works, groundworks, ducting. There were some of the stable yards that didn't actually have electricity, and obviously the system's not going to work without adequate electricity.
So at this stage, 5 years on, how many or what percentage of the racecourses have actually got the job done, that the camera's actually sitting up?
Well, rather than finish one and then start another, we're trying to bring all the racecourses with
How
us
many?
at the same
How
time.
many have the camera
So
up?
out of 25 racecourses where the CCTV system is to go, 2 have cameras, 14 are ready for cameras, 4 more have
So only
electrical
2
work in
out of the 25, 5 years on.
Deputy, the project may have been talked about for 5 years. Now, I've been in post for only a couple of months, but no work actually happened on the ground on this project until the procurement process was complete. And that procurement process was only complete in spring of this year.
You'd be forgiven, I suppose, for people maybe having the impression, if you like, or you know, that there's a reluctance, given the delay, to have these CCTVs installed. Could you accept that, you know, people might think that, you know, such is the delay of 5 years, and when I say one excuse after the other, that speaks it itself, you know, constantly giving dates. And of course, you said there's ducting to be done. Sure, any job you're doing, there's, you know, there's work to be done in advance of it. There was no pre-planning or anything, but every single time we asked, the date was put back and the date was put back. So you'd say either there's a question of competency or there's the situation is being purposely frustrated. What would you say to that? Can you accept that that might be the perception out there? Because you'd imagine, in fairness, you'd imagine with different scandals and reports of, you know, malpractice, if you like, that you'd be keen as a body to get CCTV fitted. ASAP, that you'd want to protect the integrity of the sport. You'd imagine that, as an outsider, that that'd be the first thing that you'd make this priority. But 5 years on, we're still talking about only 2 cameras up.
The absolute priority of the IHRB is to protect the integrity and the reputation of Irish horse racing and to protect the horses.
So why
that
the stalling at
participate.
CCTV?
There's been no
Oh, there's been
reluctance.
absolute stalling. There's been one excuse after the other.
Delays
You
aren't-
diverted the funding. You diverted the funding in 2018 that was meant for this project. So don't tell me that there was that there was priority on it, or that you're eager to protect the integrity. You had the funding was there since 2017. You diverted it in 2018, and for every year since, one excuse after the other.
The Deputy is better briefed than I am on what happened in the IHRB and its predecessor organisations in 2017 and 18. All I can tell you is that in its current guise, the project, which went to procurement only last winter, is being driven with determination as quickly as is practicable.
Can you
in
give
all
us a
of the
date as to when
circumstances.
more than 2 of the 25 racecourses will have the cameras up?
I would hope to see the majority of those racecourses on the list having their cameras up by the end of this year. But issues have arisen, up to and including a shortage of electronic components on the world market. We're progressing this project with a professional project manager as quickly as it can be done, having regard to the need to secure value for the public purse and assure the quality of the system. As far as reluctance to install the system goes, there's no reluctance on our part. We recognise that the CCTV system provides an additional layer of security for participants in racing.
But there's no rush on getting it done. Can I ask Ms. Eade, have you concerns, given that the funding was there since 2017, and the department also, that this job wasn't done? You know, something that would ensure protection of the integrity of the sport, you know, amidst all of the scandals and accusations of malpractice. Would you, as the body, not be concerned?
I have Deputy Munster, I have an appreciation for now the complexity of this project. I think maybe when we commenced talking about it, we didn't realise the scale and complexity. That's the truth of it.
Sorry, but I've never heard anybody fitting CCTV in any, you know, whether it's big, large building, office, but having it taken 5 years.
No,
to do.
no, true.
You know, so
true.
let's be realistic. You know,
I think it wouldn't, and this project is, I think, really. We looked into the requirements, not just in the short term, but it's 25 race courses with 25 different setups.
Sorry, rather than, because time is of the essence, are you saying you have no concerns about the delay in fitting
I'm
CCTV?
very happy with the approach the IHRB have taken on this.
You've no concerns
now.
the
I
5-year
am.
delay.
Yeah.
What about the department, Mr. Blake?
I think it's fair to say the department is disappointed that the actual original timeline of Q1 2022 wasn't met, but we do understand the complexity and the challenges associated with, you know, public procurement and challenges like that. I mean, there's estate money that's been spent, so processes have to go through. But the information we have at the moment is that the project is working at pace, and so we're hopeful to see it completed by the end of the year.
Slow pace. Can I just ask, in relation to the Curragh race course, you had said earlier, Ms. Eade, about, or I think it was the CNAG had said about the percentage of vote shares that would be you'll own if the convertible loan converts. What percentage of that do you would that be?
Can I come back to the end, the exact number on that?
Yeah, if you have it there, it'd be great.
37% on economic share. There won't be a change in the...
So it'll be 37%.
Yeah.
So I suppose if you look, the state has provided just under half of the monetary investment. The private investments making up the other half. But on the capital side, the state owns the land.
That's correct,
Yeah. The racecourse is owned by the Turf Club, who basically are the IHRB, you know, which is almost entirely state-funded. So would it be fair to say that the state interest in this company exceeds 50% when you combine it all? Can I ask the CNAG?
I think the legal fact is the economic share. So while maybe the state has put more money into it, if it's through a grant, that would have been a grant or could have been a grant to a private racecourse, completely private racecourse, and so it doesn't attract an economic interest.
Okay. Is the racecourse subject to FOI?
I don't think so, but
No. Chair, I mean, when we've been through this with other issues before, but I think if anything to come from today's meeting, if we were to recommend reform of both the rules relating to FOI and also agencies being subject to audit, particularly when you look at, it's glaringly obvious that it's majority state-owned.
State-financed.
Yeah, state-financed rather, yeah. Just to, if we look at...
Your time is up, Deputy. Now, there will be a second round of questions.
Yeah, but if we look at reform, maybe, just to ensure that all public monies invested as opposed to those via the Exchequer are actually able to be...
We can consider that for our report.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Are you okay?
Is my time up? I have one more question.
You'll have a second round.
Right, okay.
You'll have a second round and a third
one more
one.
quick question. It was just
very
in
quick
relation
one.
to...
Go ahead.
Yeah. Mr. O'Loughlin, again, you recently, I think it was your first appearance at the Agriculture Committee, you had said that you'd begin reporting the salary of the CEO in your financial statements. Is that correct, and from what year do you intend to do that?
That statement I didn't make. I'm even fresher than you realise. This is my first appearance in front of an Oireachtas committee in my current post. My salary was stated on that day. It was provided to the committee, and in line with the Code of Governance for state bodies, which my colleague from Department of Agriculture has said we are committed to aligning with, the salary will be published in our annual statements, but that will apply only from 2022 onwards, because it is my salary as opposed to the salary of the position going back.
Okay, and just very briefly, Ms. Eade, you had said that a payment had been made to the former CEO. I think you said had been made.
Yes.
Yes. Why can you not tell us what that payment was if it's been done and dusted?
Because we need to be aligned on their whole transformation project, which is something myself and...
But we're just looking to see what the payment was. I mean, why can you not tell us what the payment was?
Because HRI has not paid the payment. We've not paid over the payment.
Right, but can you disclose what that payment is?
Yeah, once it becomes in...
Well, is there anything, CEO or CNAG, is there anything?
It's a matter we're looking at in the context of the 2021 audits. They'll be completed shortly, but until they're completed, I'm not in a position to report on the figure.
Is there anything precluding HRI from giving us the amount of the payment?
Well, I suppose it is a HR matter, so I think there may be just a little bit of concern around that aspect of it. My understanding is that the payment has actually been made, whether the funding for it has been...
Funding has not gone across.
Yeah. I think that might be the issue.
So just to clarify, the payment has
been made.
agreed and has been paid.
As I understand it.
Okay, well, maybe that in the interest of just transparency, to be able to inform the committee of how much that was. Just helpful to
we'll inform with Mr. O'Loughlin. Can we do that after this meeting?
Yes, after the break. So we're taking a break for 10 minutes and we'll resume then. Thank you. I'm going to bring back in Deputy Verona Murphy, again for second round of questions. And what I'll do is if we take maybe 6 minutes each, and then we can take it from there.
Thanks, Chair.
Just after you, I have a couple of questions on myself.
That'll do, thanks. Now, so two things that I just want to address, and I may be wrong, but there's no doubt it's going to be a video record. Earlier on, Ms. Eade, I asked you about the loss on paper, as we call it, about the lands in, is it Clonmel?
Tipperary,
Yeah, well, Tipperary. You said that the department had signed off, but Mr. Blake, you told my colleague that you hadn't even notice of it. So there needs to be somebody correcting that. You didn't know about it till it had occurred, you said, but Miss Eade said that you had signed off on it.
Sorry, maybe I'll just... The department sanctioned the original purchase. That would have been before Mr. Blake's time, and would have been sanctioned by the original purchase of land.
Right.
They were notified of the swap, but we didn't ask for the appropriate level of approval, is our understanding now.
Okay.
So that just correct that
clarifies
record.
that,
Yeah.
because people are watching and it will be brought to our attention. So the other question I just want to ask is, when you mentioned that you had gotten one valuation.
Yes.
I think, we have experience of this already, Chair, where public funds are being expended in anything, regardless of whether it's a swap or not, more than one valuation. Okay. And I would have expected that the department, and maybe I'm wrong, Mr. Blake, but would it not be prudent for the department to say, either get your valuation, or how do you verify that the valuation is appropriate?
I think the point you make, Deputy, is valid in the context of hindsight now. I mean, but essentially it is something that is a matter for the state body. It's a commercial state body. It makes its own commercial decisions.
But at the same time, Mr. Blake, if you're signing off on it, you're giving them the go-ahead.
Consenting to the actual project.
You are. Yeah. And do you not feel it would be more pertinent in the department's defence of anything arising, such as what has arisen, albeit that it's on paper, that you would be covered from the point of view of looking after the public purse in getting your own valuation? Now, I know that's expending a certain amount of money, but at the same time, to me, it's about transparency and accountability and ensuring that public funds are spent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you in the context of ensuring that we have good value for money and controlling the public money. But I suppose that's why we have state bodies. I mean, they have structures and systems in place. And I agree. I mean, we in the department, we wouldn't just do it on a single quote.
Okay, so there is no onus on the department to verify that the valuation. So if a valuation came in and it raised an eyebrow, what would you do? If that valuation had come in at $1 million, and what would you do? How do you verify that then?
I mean, if something outlandish came before us, we would obviously have a look at that. But I mean, in the context of land at 25,000 an acre, that didn't raise any particular issues.
Right, okay. Well, for me, it would depend where the land was, but I appreciate it's in Tipperary, and it's probably, all Wexford land is probably worth about 30 grand an acre. So, but I still think that there has to be a better system. This could be a complete disaster. It could be a whole lot more money that we're talking about. And from previous experience, Chair, purchases in relation to different entities, for instance, the education sector, we've all recommended that there would be more than one evaluation. So, and I think that's something to bear in mind, right, going forward. Now, Dara, I know you're new to the Ihrb, and I will have a certain level of forgiveness, but I have to agree with my colleague. I come from a county where horse sport is just, it epitomises rural Ireland in Wexford anyway. It's the biggest part of it. The integrity of the sector is what drives it. And I think it's not, I know it's a slow process, the tender process, but we're about 5 years behind, and it's all been said. But I would expect that this time next year, the 25 racecourses will be up and running with cameras, because I don't want to have another scandal reported that comes into the sector whereby the Ihrb haven't carried out its function. So I'd be putting that on you for next year, for sure. And that That's the timeline you're getting from me as a member of the Public Accounts Committee, that not 2, because the last time we heard from the Ihrb, it was still 2. That, if not 1 maybe, but it's still not progress. And I appreciate that whilst the first fix might be done, I want the final fix done in 12 months' time, because that's value for money for the sector. The other thing I want to, and I brought it up before, Chair, this sector is suffering greatly in relation to insurance. And your predecessor, Ms. Eade, I asked, he told me that he had made representation to the department and different departments in relation to the difficulties for insurance. Now, whilst it may not be the remit of HRI, I believe it is. Like, you can't, if the sector doesn't survive, you'll have no function. And at the moment, it's under such serious pressure, particularly point to point, in getting insurance. I want to see the proof that there has been representation from HRI. I want to see who you've written to. I want to see what the response was. I want to see the efforts you're making, that sector survives.
Thanks,
and
Deputy.
that your funding is worthwhile. And it's paramount to the continuation of the sector, and particularly for rural Ireland. So I'd appreciate, and I'm even suggesting, Chair, that there should be a stakeholder group set up within HRI to look after these things, because it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And it's for me, the sector isn't functioning correctly without it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just some questions, Ms. Eade, in relation to Tipperary, please. In relation to this piece of land, the location of it, it's close to a station, I believe. How close is it to a railway station?
To the Curragh?
No, the Tipperary land.
The Tipperary is Limerick Junction, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Limerick Junction.
Train service is regular there. Yeah. You're aware of the policy in the National Development Plan in relation to concentrating housing developments close to transport hubs. You're aware of that? Okay. And the land was valued in 2018. Yeah?
Yeah.
One valuation. And can we just trace the different chronology of events here? So it was purchased by yourselves in what year?
I think, Chair, the agreement was done in 2018, but the actual transfer happened in 2019.
Early 2019.
Yeah.
2019. And this land swap was done in?
I think, again, agreed in 2020 and effected in 2021.
So the valuation was 2 years old?
The valuation was on the land we purchased.
Not on the land we were swapping.
Yeah, the valuation was 2 years old. You would be aware that, marginal land would be making 10,000 an acre. That land, was the land zoned?
No, it's purely agricultural land.
Had you carried out any work on the land?
No.
No drainage, no servicing of the land?
We
did afterwards, yeah. I mean, this is land to be developed as part of a racecourse going forward. So we will be draining it and it will be integrated.
You had
as part of
you had done some drainage works. How much had been spent on the drainage works of the land?
Claire?
38,000 euros.
38,000. Okay, on 7 acres.
Possibly on the full 12 acres that was bought. I don't have that detail.
Okay, so that left the total cost of it in at how much?
300,000 was the purchase.
300?
300,000 was the purchase.
And 45?
38, yeah.
338,000 total price. So
that price was for the 12 acres, I think.
For the 12 acres.
And 7 then was
and you
taken
swapped to
off.
7. Swapped to 7. And if you work it out with the 12 acres, that's running nearly 30,000 an acre, then almost 30,000 an acre between drainage and purchase, acquisition, yeah? Almost, 11.6 or 11.7 happen. Do the maths on it, but that's the rough.
I think as rough figures, that's probably correct, Chair, but I think just if there's any discrepancy in that, you might come back.
Yeah.
And
so it's working out at close to around almost 30,000 an acre. But the 7 acres then are swapped 2 years later in the deal for a value of 10,000. I have to put to you that that's a financial calamity. If I bought property or land and sold it within 2 years, and I was anyone that would be doing it and would achieve a price or a value of 1/3 of what it had cost them in that short space of time.
I think
You're aware. Can I just put you as well, Ms. Heed? You're aware that land prices increased over those 2 years dramatically. Land prices increased between 2018 and 2020. You're aware of that? Agricultural land, not zoned land, agricultural land increased in price.
I think we probably come back to you on that, because there's a couple of things.
I'm asking you the question. I'm asking you the question. There's a few things that stand out in relation to this. The first thing is that there was an old valuation. It was an outdated valuation. The second thing is there wasn't a second valuation. The third thing is that this land is standing almost 30,000 an acre. And then there's land swap done for 7 acres of it for 10,000 an acre, for almost 1/3 of the price. And all this happens at the same time as land prices increase. The sixth thing I'd say to you is I don't know the exact location. I haven't been standing in this particular field where it is, but I'm trying to draw a mental picture of it here in my mind. And what I'm saying to you is that, that land adjacent to transport hubs does have huge potential, particularly with government policy, which is correctly, which I agree with, is targeting developments, high density developments, sometimes too high for my liking, but high density developments close to transport hubs. You're aware there's a housing shortage. You're aware that it's in close proximity to the third largest city in the state. And given those 6 or 7 factors, do you not think that, from the point of view of the public purse and public money, that this is an awful outcome? Would you agree with that? That's not a good outcome.
To be honest, I'd like to just go back and review both everything you've said, but also the work that we've done and the actual future value of this parcel of land to us. But I accept the issues that you've said, but can I honestly take them away and deal with it?
Do you want to give me a response from now to initially? Would you think it was, I accept that you needed land to widen the track.
Yeah.
And strategically you had to do that. I understand that. I get that, right? But what I'm saying here is that given those 6 or 7 facts that we've now established here this morning, that the public purse, it's not a happy situation in terms of public money by a public body, by a semi-state company like yourselves. Would you agree with that? This isn't a good outcome. A CEO, do you think this is a good outcome for HRI?
Like I said, I'd like to just go back and review it. Some of the points that you're making are new to me.
Which one of the facts?
Because I still think it's a great acquisition for us.
Which one of the facts have I outlined to you is incorrect?
Well, no, I don't disagree that they're not correct, but what I'm saying is...
I've asked you to clarify the points. Now, hold on a second. I've asked you to clarify the points raised or to disagree with them or to challenge it, right? And I've outlined 6 or 7 facts to you. What I'm asking you is taking those together, are you happy with this situation that we have arrived at in terms of this land deal?
I'm not happy the way it turned out, but I'm happy we've got the land that we need to do and I didn't pay any additional funding. I didn't pay anything for this land. I got it swapped, and we're ready to do what we need to do for the project. But I'm going to accept the points that you made and look back, and I think we should do a look back as a team to see did we get this wrong. I will do that, yeah.
Thank you. And just bear with me for a moment, please. In relation to CCTV, some of this has been addressed by members already. Can we have a final completion date when these will be actually operational?
Mr. Chairman, I can't give you an exact date, but it's our intention to have all of the tracks that are in a position to have cameras installed. There's a couple of tracks around the country, not only Tipperary, where there is some redevelopment work planned. Some of that redevelopment work will involve demolition, rebuilding, adjustments to stables. We're not going to spend taxpayers' money putting a CCTV system in those circumstances.
How many tracks, how many yards are the redevelopment works carried out in?
We have CCTV on hold in 3 tracks.
So there's 3, but that leaves 22.
And there are 2, yes, and then there are 2 tracks, which takes us down to 20, where there's some civil works outstanding, so we can't start the camera installation until we get that done. We've 14 where we're actually ready to install the cameras, so I hope to see those done very, very soon. And then following that, we've 4 more where the electrical first fix is in progress, and I would anticipate getting those cameras up. My aim is to have the 14 that are ready for cameras and the 4 that are currently underway, where we can have some visibility on a finish date. I'd like to see all of those done by the end of this year. I won't make any commitments on the last 5 because there are circumstances outside our control.
Okay, and you understand that. So at this point in time, we have, is it 1 working or 2? So we have
2 have cameras installed.
We have 2 with CCTV operational.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, installed. We're not going live with the system until we have it installed in more tracks and until we have...
So can you just take you back on that for a second? Are you saying to me that it's not operational on any track at the moment?
Well, there's no point in having it operational in a track other than where there's no racing and no horses. If there's no horses on site and no racing taking place, it's of limited value. So the tracks where the cameras have been installed, we haven't
tested to see are they operational?
Oh, sorry, yes, the equipment works, but we aren't yet
on
using
2 sites. That's okay. And could I ask you to confirm how many cameras are in each yard at each track?
I'd have to come back to you on that.
Just for the benefit of the committee, is it 1 at the gate or is it 20?
It would be closer to the higher number. We've very extensive coverage across the entire stables area, and we've added in cameras in the sampling boxes where we take the anti-doping samples as well. But I don't have the number. I'm sorry. I can come back on that.
Would there be cameras in the stables themselves?
Inside the stables, no. The individual stables.
But in the sampling boxes?
Yes.
Okay. And just bear with me. So at this stage, you would hope to have them all installed, bar 5, by the end of this year.
Yes.
3 or 5 you mentioned, where there's redevelopment works.
The reasons for the 5 differ. So 3, it's redevelopment works. 2, it's civil works outstanding.
Okay. Just in relation to the write-down of the transfer of the loan facility to shares in the Curragh. I'll just ask you in relation to that. When the money was approved by HRI, what date was that on? Where the funding was approved by HRI?
Is that the loan?
The loan, yes.
You're referring to the 9 million loan? I don't have the details.
The Curragh?
I don't think it's in the loan. It was during 2020, I think.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't an issue in the 2019 financial statements.
Correct, it was during 2020.
During 2020, and it was a subcommittee of 3 that examined this, is that correct?
Sorry, I'm having a real problem hearing. I do apologise.
Was there a subcommittee of three persons from HRI that would have
they would have.
this?
We would have worked as a finance function with the subcommittee, looking at all these as analysis. Plus, we would have taken it to the board before we applied for the request for the department for the 9 million.
Okay, and can you just tell us there was 3 persons on that? Who were those 3 persons?
Robert Nixon. One of our audit and risk members, Peter Nolan, and our chairman, they were on the subcommittee.
Mr. Kavanagh?
No, he wasn't part of the subcommittee.
Chairman of the board?
The chairman of the board,
Chairman of the board, okay. And have you any idea what month that was in 2020?
Which month?
We had several meetings.
Yeah, presumably the minutes of the board will have recorded.
Yeah, we
when
would
the
have that.
decision was taken, but we don't have that.
Do you want me to come back with all those
Please
minutes?
come back
Yeah.
to us with that timeline, please. Thank you. So just go back to the members here now. Deputy James O'Connor, 10 minutes.
Margaret Cohy here. Look, I just want to welcome the representatives from the Ihrb and HRI to Leinster House today. And as you know, I'm big interested in sport. I think I've met quite a few of you before, and you're very welcome. I suppose, as somebody that's a regular race attender, I know 2020 was obviously a really challenging year with COVID, but one particular concern I have, and I'd like to ask HRI about that first, Ms. Eid, if that's okay. In relation to the attendances, at the Curragh Racecourse, the profitability of it, there was very significant money spent renovating the course, and they've been challenging to bring in crowds there. They've been challenged to bring in crowds there. Ticket price has been identified as one major concern. The connectivity of the course. But I suppose from a profitability aspect in 2020, I know it's a skewed year because we had lockdowns and pandemic. Would you give me some insight into that, or some representatives from HRI, please?
Yeah, obviously 2021 were tough in terms of attendances, but one of the stronger points for race courses during that period was the strength of the media rights, so particularly streaming. But when Ireland was the only team in town racing, that was really good for our race courses who upped their streaming. I think apart from that, I think the Curragh have been very strong in terms of reducing costs, and so they really went after that in the last year or two. What concerns me for the Curragh and all race courses now going into the future is the cost of living and the actual cost of putting on the lights and the heating and all that stuff. That's going to be a real big drain as we approach 2023. The big hit really for the Curragh at the moment is the depreciation. It's over 4 million annually, and they're going to have to get a lot more income other than racecourse attendances to fulfil that gap. What they have done this year was that they made a cash profitability, and depending again on the fuel crisis for the remainder of the year, I'd expect that they would hit their committed budget in 2022. Like I said, I am concerned about the impact on their energy bills next year, and as I am for every racecourse.
Yes, I suppose, look, my primary concern was the crowds coming in, because essentially the sustainability into the entire business of a racecourse is about getting...
And attendances as well. It's really hard. Some racecourses have done really well and done really well around their festivals. The Curragh, I think, went through a few years where I think they lost their connection maybe with their fans. And that's something that they're going to have to work very hard on going into 2023. They tried different things in 22, tried different things with ticket prices and offerings and Saturday weekends, the weekends in August, giving lots of tickets to people in the area to welcome them back. But I know they're going to have to invest to grow back those attendances next year, and HRI will definitely be there to help them get that back.
Yeah, look, it's just a point in general, an observation I made, and it is a shame for the level of funding that's been invested in that course. I think it came in at more in terms of the overall cost of the project than the renovation of Longchamps. So it was a very significant investment. And I would express a huge concern there that needs to be looked at immediately and some solution found. The connectivity as well, the aspect of having that investment put in to public transport is key. It sits on the Cork-Dublin line, one of the busiest train lines in the country, and having some degree of an approach. Have you done that in the past, trying to attract in an Irish rail service? Because that would be huge.
Just on a couple of points. Firstly, I used to be the Curragh manager back in about 2000. At the time, there was a Curragh siding which was used for transport for particularly people coming from Dublin. It's certainly something I know the Curragh would be keen to try and reinstate if possible. You mentioned Longchamp as well, Deputy, and just to say that was when I think it started out, the project was mooted to be 108 million. It actually came in at about 140 million euros in terms of the total redevelopment of Longchamp. So Ascot, when it was rebuilt in the early 2000s came in at 220 million sterling. So by comparison, our overall costs of just over 80 million are probably quite modest by comparison to those two other tracks.
So 80 million?
Just over, I think it's 82 million.
Yes, 82. And 4 million, it's an astronomical figure. I'm not a structural engineer by any means, but would you give us an indication of what that depreciation is? You know, if you're losing 4 million a year, that's definitely worth asking about.
So the depreciation covers obviously the building. The gallops land also is depreciated because the gallops need quite a bit of effort put in to maintain them to ensure they're suitable for the training schools. The building is a highly technical building, so it has a lot of plant and machinery within the building for its fixtures and also fixtures and fittings.
Right.
So it's the full remit.
Okay, perfect. I might just go over to Mr. O'Loughlin, if that's okay. And I understand you came from the pharmaceutical industry into your current role. So I just wanted to ask a quick question. In terms of the IHRB, I wouldn't mind getting an indication. So how much grant funding you received in 2020 from HRI, and just to get an indication to run the regulatory board. And in addition to that as well, I'd like to ask you just in terms of a breakdown of your full-time staff, part-time, casual and voluntary. So for example, stewards, just to give an indication of that, to be helpful to know that, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Epi. Our grant to IHRB for integrity services in racing and integrity services in point-to-point in the year 2020 was 8.3 million euros. In terms of the breakdown of full and part-time staff, I don't have that level of detail with me. I know that overall, between the office and racing officials in the field, we had 106 staff members on our accounts in 2020. But as to how that breaks down between full and part-time, don't have the exact numbers. We have.
Could you correspond with me about that proposed meeting? If you could check into that and refer back to me, I'd appreciate that, please. And just could I ask in terms of, so you were in receipt of 8.3 million, that's per year, that's in and around the same as it, Mr. O'Loughlin?
8.3 million in 2020 was a decrease on the 9 million received in 2019.
Okay. And may I ask you, in relation, what proportion of that funding goes to support the point-to-point industry?
Of that funding, of the 8.3 million, 600,000 went on point-to-point integrity services.
Just 600? Okay.
Yes, the balance, the 7.7 million, went on racing integrity services.
Yeah. Look, I know Deputy Murphy's touched off it, and it's a serious issue. I'm involved in point-to-point racing, and just to disclose that, it's important that it is. The insurance costs in that are frightening, and I suppose I know that there's different bodies within racing that look after each aspect of it, but I think there's a collective need there to seriously look at that problem. I'm getting a lot of calls from point-to-point committees, not alone within my own constituency. There's a long affinity with racing in Cork East, and in fact the steeplechase was invented in Cork East between Doneraile and as you may know. But I suppose what committees are telling me is a huge concern. A lot of them are worried about folding. I know there's been point-to-points already that have been impacted, and the knock-on impact that has for small breeders in particular. I know racing is an extremely valuable industry with a lot of major players who have a lot of money. But for smaller breeders, there are hundreds of them in my constituency that are involved in racing. That's a huge concern for them because they want to, put horses into training with local trainers. It keeps an ecosystem going, which I know I'm preaching almost to the converted. But there is an aspect of concern there when it comes to insurance that they're being left out in a limb. I think that has to be conveyed. And we are all aware that there's been, difficult litigation taken against some clubs. That's a concern I have, and I just think that we could do a lot more to support that particular facet of the industry. So look, if you have anything to say in response to that, Mr. O'Loughlin, I'd appreciate it, and maybe Ms. Eade as well.
Yeah, certainly on the insurance front for point-to-points, we do recognise that that's a real difficulty. Insurance costs across the economy have increased, but the insurance costs for point-to-points and for local hunts have soared, as the Deputy says, and as you're very much aware. We work closely with hunts to ensure that they can get insurance. It's not our role to provide the insurance for them, but whether it's local hunts who are running point-to-points or whether it's ensuring that jockeys can get insurance and so on, we do interact with the insurers. We help to define the risk. We help to set out for insurers to understand the risk, the extent to which our integrity services are mitigating that risk, and we do what we can to support the hunts and the other participants to get their insurance. I'm not sure, but maybe Ms Eade will want to talk more about the financial support that HRI has provided to ensure that insurance can be put in place.
That would be helpful if that's okay.
Yes, so there's a couple of ways that we obviously support the point-to-points through their grants and their prize money in HRI, and Deputy Murphy there made a recommendation that maybe we get some sort of task force together, which, to be honest, probably been overdue, that we do that just on insurance matters. So, because it's not just point-to-pointing now, we're actually seeing the insurers, providers across the remit of areas we need to be insured, kind of being very selective about what they'll insure, charging us more. The premiums are going up and the excesses are also going up. So we're all having a tough time in insurance. So we do need support, and we do need a bit more competition in the market, I'd say. We can only go to so many underwriters, and a lot of those underwriters for racing have been based in the UK. And now they're kind of saying, as a result of Brexit, they don't need they don't need that risk in their profile anymore. So a real big issue for us. Yeah.
Over time, we'll let you back in for a second round of questions. Deputy Carty, 6 minutes.
Thank you. Maybe just Mr. Blake, you might just remind us how much was allocated for this year to the Horse and Greyhound Fund?
Sorry about me. Fund allocation to HRI in 2022 was 70.4 million.
7 point, that's just the HRI element of it then. So how did that figure, how did you arrive at that figure as a department as an appropriate allocation?
Ordinarily, all the state bodies will make their pitches to the department in the context of estimates position. Those are evaluated on the basis of, priorities across all government, all elements of the department. Conversations are had with the state bodies, and conversations are had with DEPR. And on that basis, the actual, the whole Horse and Greyhound Fund is actually agreed.
Yeah, because this is a unique scenario in that two distinct separate organisations have their financial allocations tied together, because the Horse and Greyhound Fund is approved on the back of a proposal by your department and minister, and then it's divided exactly 80-20 on an annual basis. Can I just ask the CNAG, is there any other situation where state money is divided in that way to two organisations on a pro rata basis?
Rigidly as that, I can't recall any other circumstances.
Yes, so do you see, Mr. Blake, from a purely financial, because you just talked about, the organisations make their financial pitch. On any given year, HRI might make a fantastic pitch that would warrant additional funding. Another year, the Greyhound Board may do the same, but either or other organisation will either rise or fall on the back of what has happened somewhere else. It doesn't appear to be a very appropriate way of expending public finances.
And I think people have argued that, indeed, Deputy Carty. I suppose we need to go back and see where this comes from, and this is actually set in statute in the context of the 2001 Horse and Greyhound Act. Yeah. So, I mean, that's where the...
But statute can be changed.
Yes, yeah.
I suppose it's further complicated, because then HRI get an allocation, and then it is for you as HRI to make another allocation to the IHRB, which in itself is a separate board. So the body that is essentially being regulated is responsible for funding its regulator. Do you see any difficulty in that scenario, Ms. Eade?
I suppose there are, when we get our allocation, Deputy Carty, we get told kind of, this is what you need to spend on your revenue element, this is what you need to spend on your capital. And within that, there's bands of the allowance that can be spent in certain areas. So I know there's at the moment, they say...
So just because I'm very short on time, are you saying, so essentially what IHRB get is a proportion of your budget?
Correct.
Okay.
Up to a proportion of my budget.
Okay.
So the IHRB would come to me we determine the fixtures, so we know we put some costs on the Ihrb by the nature of saying there's 390 fixtures.
No, it's just the very broad specifics. But going back again, do we see a difficulty here? The regulatory body is dependent on the budget that is assigned to HRI and the strength of their business case, which in turn is linked to a separate organisation. So even if we look at the issue of the Ihrb, which in itself is an amalgamated structure of the steeplechase and the turf club, which then have their own, as we've heard previously, their own issues. Is there not a case, and I'm asking this of the department, for either Ihrb to become a completely independent body or to get rid of the pretense and just amalgamate it into HRI altogether?
I think the fact of having an independent regulator is important.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I couldn't foresee that you...
But is it independent when it's relying on its funding from the organisation that essentially it's regulating?
But every regulator is depending on funding from someone, you know, so...
But generally from the line department.
Yeah, but in the context of the pitch that HRI would make to us, they're taking into account the expectation of what they need to spend in conversation with the Ihrb. So I mean, it's not a black box that, you know, in which the interests of the integrity are not actually taken into account.
No, but there is a lot of entanglement. And then if we go to the previous debate we had around the Curragh racecourse. So your previous boss stood down, received a financial package that we don't know the value of it.
Sorry, are you talking about my CEO previous? No, he didn't receive a package.
Oh, he didn't receive a package?
He did not.
Okay.
No,
So he stood down and took on the role of, and apologies to the Chair for that, he took on a role in the Curragh. So you're negotiating with him, according to your previous and replies in respect of the Curragh.
I'm not negotiating with the CEO.
HRI are in engagement with Curragh Racecourse Company. That's what you said in relation to their financial prospects. Is that not true?
Oh, in terms of expecting them to deliver against their financial targets. So their budget comes to us and has to get approved by HRI. That's part of the conditions of the sanction. We need to make sure that they're delivering in line with their budget. But we don't negotiate with the CEO of the Curragh.
So who do you have the discussions with?
So the chair of CRL and the CEO would come and present or provide their budget to us, but we would be looking for improvements, savings, all of that stuff that you would.
So I would have thought that if somebody's coming to me with, you know, basically a proposition for the financial year to come, and you're discussing and looking for improvements and maybe responses, that would constitute negotiation, would it not?
Budget approval, really, but he's not negotiating for funding or anything. He's you know, it's not that sort of relationship, if you like.
Okay, thanks.
You might get another go. Deputy Catherine Murphy.
Can I just ask Mr. O'Loughlin, you've been answering the queries in relation to this long-running saga that we've had here in relation to CCTV. So you were the buck stops with you in relation to that, am I correct on that?
Yes.
So it would have stopped with your predecessor. The book would have stopped with your predecessor, is that correct?
I'm not entirely sure the book was even moving at that stage.
No, I know, but it would have been. Right, okay. I think you'd accept that it should have stopped there, okay? Can I just ask, I just wanted to just have that clarified. In relation to why on earth would an NDA be entered into? Where's the transparency? Why would an NDA be entered into in relation to an exit package?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
Well, there are HR elements to it, so you'd appreciate that this all predates me and my knowledge of it is not 100%, but there are HR elements to it.
But I mean, if there's public
confidentiality elements and employment elements.
Look, if there's public money, we have to be able to see the public money. I mean, people could put NDAs all over the place, and we'd be guessing at things. Like, there has to be some degree of transparency.
Yes, and in relation to my time in the IHRB, that transparency has already been committed to. And as my colleague from Daphne has said, we will be complying with the Code of Governance of State Bodies.
Can I ask, because it's a very short in time, did anybody else leave with a package at the same time as the former CEO?
The answer is yes.
And was there an NDA with that as well?
There was an early retirement and redundancy scheme put in place in the IHRB following a review of the structures in 2020. That scheme was put in place in 2021, and a number of staff exited either under the redundancy or the early retirement element of the scheme.
Yeah. Now, you said that it wasn't moving at all in the book when I asked if the book stopped. Would you be critical of that? Should it have happened? It was that an issue that was a significant issue in the, when there was a handover. And why, could I ask, when this has gone on since mid-2021, that there is any kind of mid-2021, and we're still not at a point where is it paid? Has the exit package been paid to the individual? What has not been transferred? Because I'm confused. I thought Ms. Ehrb said that it wasn't paid, but it seems to be that it wasn't transferred. Which is it?
If I may.
Yeah.
Because our funding comes from HRI, anything which IHRB pays for is paid for out of funds transferred from our funder. But in relation to the specifics on this, if I could beg the committee's indulgence, it will all be dealt with in the context of the audit of our 2021 financial statements, which are still between ourselves and the Office of the Controller.
So it won't, the NDA won't apply then, because we'll see it, because it'll be in the statements, the amount.
It's in the process between ourselves and the Controller and Auditor General. The audit process hasn't concluded. I couldn't tell you now what will be disclosed at that point, other than that we are, as it stands, bound by the agreements that remain in place.
I mean, that's gobbledygook, to be honest with you.
Could I just maybe add something in relation to it? Non-disclosure agreements are an absolute standard feature of settlements that are made around termination of employment or ending of employment. We've seen it in other organisations as well. I've reported previously on severance deals and the use of NDAs. An NDA will typically be phrased in such a way that if there's a statutory obligation to disclose, that disclosure can be done. But I think disclosures other than within a statutory structure, like, for instance, the presentation of annual financial statements, there may be a difficulty around it. So as the Chief Executive has said, we are looking at this in the context of the 2021 financial audit.
Right.
I haven't determined yet whether I'll draw attention to any matter in relation to it or disclose anything.
Can I just clarify, has this amount been paid to the individual?
The individual has received the funds.
Okay. And when did that happen?
Prior to his exiting, or very shortly
Okay, so it's
afterwards.
it's 2021.
2021
Okay,
started.
and why is it not transferred between? Why is there it not being transferred? Is it between HRI or IHRB that the transfer happens?
The transfer hasn't taken place yet because this exit was part of a broader transformation and modernisation programme that the IHRB had resolved to engage in, which is the reason why they recruited a new Chief Executive Officer. And we haven't fully settled on what that means between ourselves and HRI.
Can I just finally want to ask you, I mean, it was fairly high-profile articles in the paper earlier this year. Paul Kimmage would have been the author of one of them, a very long article, and it was related to doping in or a question mark about doping in the sport. I know that there was another Oireachtas committee looked at this, and I had looked at it in advance. I know there was a report done by Dr. Shewan from New South Wales. I'm correct on that? Yeah. There was recommendations made. Have all of those recommendations been adopted? One of those recommendations was that CCTV cameras would be installed. What other recommendations are outstanding at this stage?
Dr. Suan made a number of recommendations. The recommendations that have no cost implications we were in a position to implement immediately. Some of them have cost implications. Those will be implemented, we hope, in the course of 2023.
Can you give us a note on what's outstanding, what the recommendations are, what's been done, and the timeline for, or what the reasons why the other issues have not been adopted? This is, as we talk, a huge, big sport. Integrity is absolutely critically important, and obviously, you know, there would be absolutely important that where there are recommendations that ensure that integrity, that they are adopted and implemented.
We agree wholeheartedly with the Deputy. We have broken out 17 recommendations. We intend budgeting to implement those over the course of 2023, but that's in the context of having a budget approved for 2023. We're not at that point yet.
Thank you. Deputy Munster.
Thanks, Chair. Missy, just before the break, you gave a commitment to let us know what the payment was, the payment that was made to the ex-CEO of the Horse Racing Board. Can you furnish us with that information now?
I didn't know the nature of the exact NDA, so I'll take advice from CNAG, but if I can, I will release the information, but at the moment I understand I can't. Is that correct?
Well, I think there could be a difficulty because there is a non-disclosure agreement in place. Yeah. So I think it behoves the two agencies to be careful.
Okay. Well, perhaps when you can, that will be furnished with that.
As I said, Deputy, we are looking at the matter in the context of the 2021 financial statements audit. And as I said, I haven't determined yet whether I want to draw attention to any difficulties that I see with the payment, if there are.
Okay, thanks. Just in relation to, just looking for clarity in relation to yourselves, the HRI, in the recruitment, can you clarify that you were not in any way involved in the recruitment process for the CEO of the racecourse?
No involvement, no.
Okay. You didn't facilitate advertising, or you didn't make contact with a recruitment company or pay for any aspect of it?
So we had CRL used a executive search company that HRI had a what do you call it, a contract with for executive search. And the board of CRL had some HR administration support, but that was it. They weren't involved in the recruitment, the selection or anything like that.
So did you engage a company? Is that what you're saying?
It was the same company we use, but right. CRL did their own advertising for the role, yeah.
So other than that, there was absolutely, you didn't pay for anything with regard to the recruitment process, or categorically stated there was nothing at all whatsoever?
Unless I'm proved wrong, I'm not aware that we paid for anything, no.
Okay.
And if we have, we charge it back.
Okay, that's grand, Chair, thanks.
You okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Deputy O'Connor.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. Just a question to HRI, just in relation to the administration costs. I think from 2019 into 2020, there was an increase from 7.83 million to 8.423 million in 2020. And I suppose I just want to get background on why that administration cost increase happened. I think it was related to labour costs. But what are these labour costs, if that's okay? And could you just explain that, please?
So the main two drivers of the admin movement there was about 225,000, which related to depreciation on the HRI building. And then in terms of the salary related costs, there would have been a global agreement on salary increase at that time of 3%, plus we had some maternity backfills as well as part of that process. So that's the main reason for the movement. We did not avail of any COVID supports during that period for permanent HRI roles because our funding was in place. So it's not like we needed to go and look for
and there was a rise, Ms. Eade, in legal costs in 2020. I just wanted to get a background why necessarily that happened. I understand in 2020 that there was a substantial rise in the legal costs in HRI. So would you might comment on that, if that'd be okay? Thank you.
Yeah, there was an increase in just over €100,000 in the legal costs from 2019 to 2020. So that was made up of a number of different elements, one of which was the funding round for the CORA, and another significant element would have been legal costs in relation to the strategic alliance between Tote Ireland and Tote UK.
Okay.
They would have been the significant elements.
Just in relation to the CORA, that's my final question on the CORA, but I'd like to try and get the attendance figures. I understand you probably have those, but would you be able to furnish, I understand you mightn't have them with you, but could you furnish me with those, please, just out of interest, because I think from, I suppose, an aspect of transparency and giving an indication of where things are at and what it's going to take to make things work as well, just to get a good return for your own organisation, for the state, in terms of the investment there. That would be helpful to get that, please, if that's okay. I don't want to expect a response on that, but one other local issue as well, it's been brought up on numerous occasions in Cork, was the cancellation of Kinsale point-to-points, because I think there was a rule from was it Ihrb, where the decision was not to go into June with point-to-point racing. I don't know why that was advanced by yourselves, because I suppose, you know, from a national hunt point of view, Galway, and it's a mixed meeting and it happens in the summer. But it was very popular. A lot of people in the racing industry from a grassroots level love going there, and it just seemed to be pulled. And I think it's important just to give an explanation to that. If you could just comment on that, please.
The point-to-point season, as defined, begins in October and ends at the end of May. The season is already significantly longer now than it was a couple of years ago, with a finite number of fixtures. So the decision that the National Hunt stewards took was that the season should end at the end of May, because to drag it out any longer would mean stretching the season, stretching the people involved, but without the additional fixtures, there wasn't much additional benefit. Unfortunately, the bank holiday weekend in June falls after the end of May, and just by definition falls outside of the season as it's defined. But my understanding is that the organisers in Kinsale of that particular event have been offered weekends in May when the event could take place, and would be supported at that stage. But unfortunately, every sport has an end date on its season, and we've seen even the GAA shortening the football and hurling season. So once the season is ended, no more fixtures can take place. Because ground gets drier as the year progresses, or tends to get drier, there's additional risk, there's additional cost associated with watering for various reasons. The season is fixed. And
I don't worry, Mr. Rocknam, I'm well in tune with that, but I wouldn't necessarily agree. I won't lie to you. I think that's an issue, and I do think you need to engage with the point-to-point committee down there about that, because I think it's a bone of contention. I think costs as well. I suppose going into that time of year, maybe is an issue of getting stewards and all that. I don't know, but you know, there's been a number of issues raised to me about that, and I suppose it was traditionally the final fixture of the season. So I appreciate the insight, and chairperson, that's okay. I'll finish on that.
Deputy Devlin has joined us online. Deputy, if you wish to come in, just put up your hand signal. I know you're trying to juggle other parliamentary duties this morning. Just in relation to the loan facility, the 9 million, and then it's converted into shares. How much of it at this point is converted into shares? Is it just over 6 million?
7.6, I think, is it?
7.6 has been paid across, yeah.
I think, just in the interest of accuracy, none of it is converted into shares. It is a convertible. It's a loan, and at a particular trigger date, which I think 31st of January 2024, any outstanding liability will be converted
It looks like that's the direction of travel, that's where it's going. Would that be right? that will be, at this point, as most likely, it will be
It
converted.
will be converted, and it's earning an interest rate as well to increase the value of the share.
Okay. And the private investors in the Curragh, 49 million, I think I saw was the figure. Has any of the private investors, have they offered that kind of facility?
Yeah, they've paid up as well, yeah.
But now, when you say they've paid up, can I ask you directly, when you say they've paid up, have they provided a loan facility where they would, where it could be converted into shares?
Exactly.
That's
They've
all
done
right.
exactly
That's
the same,
fine,
yeah.
okay. And could I ask you as well, just in relation to the CEO, he would have been in with us a number of times here. What date did he hand in his, what date did he finally notify you that he was stepping down as CEO of the company, or were you made aware of that? What date was that?
I think, sorry, I'm really struggling with hearing you, sir. I can't hear.
What date, sorry, what date was it that that the CEO, the former CEO, notified you, or what date did his time expire on? You know, when did you first have sight of the date that Mr. Kavanagh was stepping down? When were you first made aware of that?
June, 4th of June 2021, when his candidacy was brought forward to the HRI board for approval.
Okay. Okay. And what date was the 9 million convertible loan facility approved by HRI?
The facility was approved in 2020, the 9 million 2020.
In 2020. Okay. So it would have been prior to his departure?
Yeah.
Roughly a year, maybe. Okay. And can you, as CEO of HRI, can you confirm that that you're happy that there would be no conflict of interest in terms of the overlap between Mr. Kavanagh's role as CEO of HRI and the approval of the convertible loan to the Curragh?
Yeah, I suppose we had the protection of having a subcommittee work on all of the financing for the Curragh. We had an evaluation. We also had independent advice on everything that we did. We also had to get sanction from the department, which was obviously independent of Mr. Kavanagh, before anything was agreed or anything was paid over. I suppose from my perspective as CEO, I've got a very strong chair who looks at these things very strategically and measured, and would have made sure that we did it in accordance with good governance.
Okay. And Mr. Blake, from the department's point of view, are you happy that your scrutiny of that there would be there's no conflict of interest there, or no issues arise out of that?
I mean, we continue to liaise, as I said earlier, in relation to the Curragh event, but in the context of the proposal came to us, it was evaluated through the public spending code, and approval was agreed. Discussion took place with Deeper, and approval was subsequently.
New Ihrb.
Yeah.
New Ihrb. New Ihrb.
New Ihrb as well.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. My hearing was worse a couple of months ago, but it's starting to improve a bit. I wasn't really deaf in that ear for about 3 months. But hopefully yours will come back as well. Could I just ask you, in relation to the cash in transit, I'm a bit of a loss with this one. The 389,000, okay? So this is collected from a race course. A company called Seneca have this, and they have it in their possession, as I understand, for about 3 days. 2 or 3 days.
It's shorter now. I believe we're only like 24 hours.
On this particular case, now, I just want to go back to this for a second. And it just happens that within that time, the company is liquidated. And what I'm trying to understand is that it wasn't their money.
It wasn't their money, yeah. It was our money in transit.
But it was, it shouldn't show on their balance sheet because they were holding it in custody for yourselves. And how did that become an asset of Seneca to be used in the liquidation process and to pay off debtors?
Well, to be honest with you, this is subject to a Garda investigation. I don't know where it is, but they obviously were using the funds in an inappropriate manner. So they were using our funds to fund their business.
Okay. And you mentioned investigation. What's the nature of that investigation?
I mean, we gave all the information together with everybody else impacted to the Garda.
Okay.
Whether they were able to get anywhere or not, I think,
Okay.
I'm not sure. I probably can't really say too much
Okay.
more than that, to be honest.
But you retrieved a recovery of 100 and something thousand. What was it?
We 120 we got back, yeah.
120,000. Okay, so you got back 120, but there's 270,000 a while. And you said you're not sure about the Garda investigation. How long is the Garda investigation ongoing?
It went on from the time we submitted the information,
Right.
but I'm not sure if they...
We don't have an update.
No, like
And
it...
You don't get an update typically.
Yes,
Yeah.
but if somebody had 270,000 of my money, I'd be looking for an update.
I know.
You know, the Gardaí are investigating, so presumably there's some liaison going on with Garda Síochána. You know, could you contact Garda Síochána and maybe just raise us off, maybe, you know, is this investigation still live?
Okay,
You know,
yeah.
do they expect any progress on this? I know they have to be careful what to do because obviously, you know, and to be careful what to say because of
Yeah.
potential implications regarding legal proceedings and, you know, possible outcomes of legal proceedings, court proceedings. But could we have it confirmed that the investigation is still live into this 269,000 that's gone missing, that hasn't been recovered? And are the Gardaí actively pursuing it at the moment? And what's the timescale maybe for the completion of that investigation? If we could just have the information.
I can
While
go
I
back.
recognise that it wasn't directly taxpayers' money, you know, we are talking about bodies here that are funded by the taxpayer.
It still matters, and it still
Yes.
it was hard for those businesses, but I'm not sure. I have to check back on how active
Please.
it is. Yeah,
And if you can
absolutely.
revert back to us on that, thanks. Now, just if the members of the committee have another, did you get back in a second time? You did.
I've just a single
Go on,
question.
Go ahead.
Just, Ms. Eade, one major concern I have, I know there's huge changes happening in the regulation of gambling, and there's diverging views in it, of course, and that's just the nature of what it is. And it's obviously very problematic. But one of the touted changes, I think there's some discussion about potential removal of ATMs from racecourses as one potential, I suppose, change. I just wanted to ask what impact do you think they would have? I think it would be detrimental to the, I suppose, the environment, the economic environment of a course, for whether it is caterers, small bookmakers that are not the major conglomerate bookmakers. I think it would finish them. And I just want to ask our HRI, have you anything to say on record on that? Because for me,
Yeah, I think we have had some discussions on that particular point, and as far as I understand, but I'll double check, is that they are recognised as being allowable on a track, on a race track. So, but can I come back to you on that, because I know
it's been
that
put essentially to bed in a sense.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Deputy Carty.
I just want to deal with the remuneration package and the pay package for the CEO of HRI, and with the department first, just so I can get a clarification. So DEPR had set in place new guidelines that would indicate what was the recommended salary scale for this position. Now, the previous CEO of HRI was on an existing salary scale, which was about €50,000 plus. When he stood down and a new CEO was came into place, because of a business case that was made by the board of HRI, both the Department of Agriculture and DEPR signed off on that, which essentially meant that the new CEO had the higher, in about €50,000 more than what was the previous guidelines. Am I wrong in anything I've just said there?
Just on the specific of the difference in salary, I just don't have it to hand. But what I can say is, in the context of the actual agreement and the proposal in relation to the salary of the current CEO, that is dealt with in the Code of Practice for Governance of bodies, state bodies, and the process would be that the actual board would have made an application to the department for approval to actually move forward with the appointment and with a suggested salary scale. And this, we would have actually gone through that and discussed it a bit deeper in the context of the codes that are the actual value that was actually being proposed.
Okay.
We found it. We agreed to it on the basis that comparable organisations, it wasn't out of line. Yeah.
Yeah, so just because Ms. Eade, you were the Chief Financial Officer during this process, and in my understanding of it, the business case that was provided by HRI to the departments was based on a report that was received by Marsha McLennan. Would that be correct?
Sorry, I have no awareness of the process. I was a candidate, so I wouldn't have seen any of this stuff. Sorry.
Okay, so in January 2019, Marsha McLennan provided a report to HRI on the remuneration of the CEO.
Okay, on the old CEO.
Well, on the position of the CEO.
Okay, okay.
So were you not aware of that?
I don't recall it, to be honest. It wouldn't. I don't recall it. Maybe I was. I'm not being vague deliberately. I actually don't remember it. Yeah.
Chair, just Mr. Casey, were you in situ at that point? Because you're the Chief Financial Officer.
No, I've only joined since the 4th of July.
Okay.
No, Ms. Eade was the Chief Financial Officer.
Yeah,
at that time.
I don't recall it. I'll be honest with you, but it does sound like something that would have been done, but I just don't recall it. Sorry.
Okay, because well, maybe is there anybody that can indicate, because that report was actually provided to HRI in January 2019.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, do we know who commissioned that report?
Well, actually, I was just going to say, and I don't know the answer to this, it's a question. There is a remuneration committee in HRI. I would imagine that those kind of matters, particularly for the most senior posts, would have been dealt with by the remuneration committee. So they may have commissioned it.
Okay.
I can't say offhand. I just don't.
No,
have
It would have been our HR director, probably.
But just in terms of the remuneration committee, is that what it is? Does the Chief Financial Officer not sit on that?
I didn't sit on it before. No.
Okay. Okay. So because it strikes me as strange that HRI would have commissioned that report in 2019, considering there was no vacancy and the established position of his package was secure.
I'll come back to you as to why it was commissioned and who asked.
Oh, okay.
There would have been an expectation, I think, wasn't there a contract which would have been coming to an end with the previous Chief Executive?
2 years later.
So there may, yeah. But I mean, obviously something like that you need to kind of plan ahead.
Okay, so I'm taking it that nobody can answer me today whether HRI, examined whether it was possible to identify a candidate under the previous agreed deeper guidelines.
I think probably the board and would need to answer that, Mr.
Okay. Well, just in terms of your own position, so you're in situ as the Chief Executive since September of last year.
I was the interim, so I did the two roles for a period, yeah.
Okay. But the final salary position wasn't agreed until November of last year. Isn't that correct in terms of approval from the department?
Just struggle for a date, Deputy. No, we'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. So my question is, when you were going through the recruitment process, did you have any idea of what the actual final salary of the position would be? No. So would you have accepted the previous salary scale that had been agreed?
That had been agreed. Sorry, that the existing salary had been in place for a long time.
The deeper salary guidelines were in place.
I wouldn't have, to be honest with you, I wouldn't have been looking out for that information. I was literally applying for the role because I really wanted the job and I love the industry. I didn't go into HRI for financial reasons, so.
You guys just cost us €50,000 a year.
I don't think so.
Well, that's the position that we've after here, and we've somebody who's eminently suitable for the role who is on the record here of saying that they were willing to accept a salary scale.
I didn't actually say that.
That was laid down. Well,
say that.
Well, which is it, Chair? I'll leave it at that.
Which next?
Have a final question, Deputy Murphy.
No, I'm happy. I think we have set a bar for the next appearance.
Okay, thank you. All happy. So the want to thank the witnesses from the Department and from the two bodies for joining us today, and the staff of HRI and Ihrb and the Department, of course, who were involved in preparing for this meeting. I also want to thank Seamus McCarthy, Controller and Auditor General, and Mark and her staff for assisting today's meeting. It is agreed that the Clerk will seek any follow-up information and carry out any agreed actions from this meeting. Agreed. Okay. It is also agreed that we note and publish the opening statements and the briefings for today's meeting. Agreed. Thank you. So we've a break for lunch, and the committee will resume in private session before moving into public session to deal with correspondence and other business in the afternoon at 1:30 sharp. So, Barmina Mahakwev, Colera.